Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's meeting of the Planning Committee of Wokingham Borough Council on Wednesday, the 8th of December 2021. This is a hybrid meeting, with some people are present with me in the chamber, and there are others participating remotely by using Microsoft Teams. The meeting is also live streamed on YouTube. I'm Councillor Chris Bowring, and I chair the meeting. The Planning Committee, most of whom are in the chamber, consists of 11 elected borough councillors and is supported by a variety of officers. There are representatives on the committee from all four political groups on the council. The officers present this evening, alongside me in the chamber, is Callum Wernham, who is the, find your title, is the Democratic and Electoral Services Specialist and Clerk to the committee. Remotely have Justin Turvey, who's the Operational Manager for Development Management, Chris Easton, Head of Transport, Drainage and Compliance, Conor Corrigan, Service Manager for Planning and Delivery, and Mary Severin, the Borough Solicitor. Now, this is a quasi-judicial meeting with formal procedures which must be adhered to. Manager for each application, firstly, the Planning Officer will present the application. Then only those speakers who have pre-registered to speak will be called to address the committee. No one else, including borough councillors, town and parish councillors, agents, applicants, or objectors or supporters are permitted to address the committee, ask questions, interrupt or disrupt the meeting. But everyone has had a chance to comment on the applications through the normal consultation process. Please note that there is a strict time limit for speakers of 3 minutes for each of the four categories: town and parish councils, objectors, supporters, and borough members affected by the application. Members of the committee are more impressed by the quality of what you say rather than how long you speak for. But above all, please stay within your time limit. Following the registered speakers, members of the committee will discuss and debate the application and seek clarification from the council's professional planning officers in order to try to reach a decision. The decision reached by the committee may or may not agree with that recommended by the presenting case officer. The decision, finally, it is the committee's responsibility to determine any valid planning application placed before it using current national and local planning policies and relevant decisions of the Independent Planning Inspectorate. Our role is not to suggest alterations to applications, nor to consider whether they are a good idea, whether they are needed, whether they are too costly, and if there are alternative uses of the land or site or more suitable uses of land elsewhere. If you're joining us remotely, please ensure your camera is switched on only when you are speaking. And for everyone, please make sure your microphone is switched on when speaking and off at other times. Thank you. So move on to the agenda. And the first item is apologies. Can we have any apologies?
Yes, Chairman. Apologies from councillors Rochelle Shepherd-Debay and Stephen Conway. Rochelle Shepherd-Debay will be participating online, but will not be able to vote this evening.
Thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting. Members, any? Yes, Bill?
Yes, thank you. Committee members present, you had me down as present. In fact, I gave my apologies.
Oh, thank you, Bill. I'm sure we can amend that.
Thank you.
There are no other points. I will sign the minutes. I find the pen. Can I borrow a pen? Thank you. And declarations of interest. Yes, Andrew.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I declare a prejudicial interest in application 211686, land off Meldrith Way, and will be leaving the council chambers whilst that application is considered.
Thank you, Pauline.
Thank you, Chairman. On one of the applications, my address is listed as objecting to the application. It wasn't me that objected.
Okay, understood. Applications to be deferred to withdrawn. I know that number 60, which is the application for Turtley East, has been withdrawn. So we will not be debating that this evening. We move on to the first application, which is 160 Reading Road in Wokingham. On page 9, case officer is Baldip Pulahi. Baldip, good evening. Over to you.
Good evening, Chair. Thank you. I'll just load the presentation. So this is an application at 160 Reading Road. It's a full application for the proposed erection of a two-storey plus loft level dwelling with an integrated garage following the demolition of the existing bungalow. This application was deferred from October's committee to allow for a member's visit. This is the site plan, which shows the location of the proposed dwelling. This will be the proposed ground floor. As stated, there'll be an integrated garage, living, dining, kitchen areas. These are the proposed first and second floors. Following the deferral from October committee, revised plans were submitted. So bedroom 5 from the loft level has now been removed, and this will purely be used for storage. These are the proposed elevations of the dwelling. Again, the height has now been reduced to 8.4 meters. This is in comparison to the previous plans, which had a height of 9.5 meters. The roof lights on the previous plans, which were at the loft level height, have now also been removed. This is a street scene elevation, which shows the existing principal elevations and the proposed principal elevations of the proposed dwelling within the street scene. As you can see that it shows other dwellings alongside this section of Reading Road with comparative heights. This is the existing site at present. This is the front elevation. This is the existing site, the rear elevation. The next few slides will show you street scene views of other two-storey dwellings in there along this side of Reading Road. And subject to conditions set out in the officer report, this application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Baldip. We have a couple of 3 speakers. First is Peter Mathers. I hope I pronounced his name correctly. With us this evening, I think. It's the Mathers.
Thank you.
Oh. We have some slides to see. Is that coming up?
Okay, thank you. So hello, I'm Peter Mathers. I live at 162. First, a word of thanks. The applicant's architect has submitted revised proposals, which are clearly an improvement, and I realise that he only did so in response to concerns raised by you in your October meeting, so I am grateful. I do still have a number of concerns. Errors. So throughout this application, there have been a large number of errors made, which have sought to put it into a better light. So on this first slide, which you've actually already seen, but the latest error is in this document here. This shows our house, 162, as being 8.2 metres high. In fact, it is 7.2 metres high, as stated by the planning officer in the October meeting. Misrepresentation of the height of our house has allowed the architect to show 162 as being the same height as 164 and 160 as lower than 162. This is a false picture. Using the correct height of our house, 162 is clearly lower than 164, and crucially 160 will be higher than 162. This proposal will therefore disrupt the downward slope of roof lines in line with the downward slope of the road. The architect has salami sliced down from 6 to 5 to 4 bedrooms in an attempt to obtain approval of the largest house that he can. Surely this is an abusive process. Given all the errors, the dishonest and incompetent nature of the application, and the continual changes which have been made, surely it should be refused on those grounds alone. Height. So can we move to the next slide, please? Reading Road is a big, wide road. Your eyes naturally follow the line of houses on one side of the road only. Looking at our side, the average height is 7.36 metres, so the proposal will be over a metre higher. The average of the adjacent properties is less than 7 metres, so the proposal will be almost 1.5 metres higher. Next slide, please. So comparative heights are shown on this graph. Given the proposal is now for a 2-storey house and surrounding properties are also 2 storeys, why does it need to be so much higher than them? I note the application shows the height of circa 8.4 metres. If you do approve it, would you please impose a condition that it must be no more than 8.4 metres? Flooding. Next slide, please. The end of the back garden of 162 and the whole of the back garden of 160 regularly flood after heavy rain. The applicant's own house flooded 14 years ago. Back garden flooding has been worsened by the removal of several large trees by the applicant in late 2020. The planning office has conceded the proposal will increase surface water runoff. Motivation. I would point out a few facts. The applicant has often talked about moving house because of his drainage concerns. To avoid the sill, he has now committed to stay for a further 3 years. The applicant and his wife live on their own in a small bungalow, which they bought 14 years ago. It is difficult to understand why they need to upsize from a small bungalow to a large house. I urge you to reject this dishonest and incompetent application and encourage the applicant to submit a more honest and reasonable proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neighbours. And now we have Peter Lindley Hughes, please. And he is remote, I believe.
Good evening. Thank you, Chairman. Just bear with me while I load the presentation. My name is Peter Lindley Hughes, architect and agent for the applicant. This third iteration of the design process is a significant departure from our original application. The design was amended to align to neighbours' correspondence, concerns from the previous committee, and the client instruction to de-risk the scheme, as in their words, they are not getting any younger. We have addressed the third floor internal level, velux and window concerns, height and massing generally, omitted the garage to the front garden, and omitted the dormer windows to the third floor. Given the positive email collaboration with neighbours Peter and Vicky Matters, it is disappointing that the objections remain. The image in the objectors' presentation attempting to show similar heights of neighbours and existing bungalows is significantly misleading. 162 ridge height is an overbearing 4 metres higher than the existing. 158 is 1.3 metres higher, as evidenced by the site visit, photograph and survey. Heights noted by the objector and within the planning officer's previous report are incorrect, especially the statement the design would be 2.5 metres taller than their home. Heights of 158 to 168 range from 7.1 metres to 8.22 metres tall, with number 162 adjacent being the tallest. The average Reading Road height is being around 8.5 metres tall. The new home will be 1 metre lower than 162, previously the same height, and only 1.8 metres taller than 158, standing at 8.35 metres tall, circa 8.4, below the street average. Dashed line shows previous design height. This is not estimated, but surveyed in January 2020, obtained in the last 6 weeks, which explains the errors. Significant, as this was undertaken as a collaboration by houses 158 to 164 to demolish and redevelopment all 4 homes, including the neighbours. This shows clear intention by the neighbours to demolish and upgrade their homes in the near future, and affirms the scheme should be reviewed as acceptable to local policy and not solely to the adjacent properties. If the direct adjacent rule was the method, number 162 on the left would never have received approval at the time, being an overbearing 4 metres taller than the neighbour. Note the rear dormer windows to 162 overlooking the neighbour's garden, one of the neighbour's core objections for the initial scheme. However, clearly the development of 162 is acceptable. The scale is a result of the changing needs of homes over the last 50 years, the exact situation for this application in meeting current and future requirements for a decent sized family home. Our homes are getting larger. They need to accommodate elder and younger generations returning home due to high care home costs and new home costs. Families need at least 1, but ideally 2 dedicated home office spaces and a dedicated area for distance learning for school children, putting significant pressure on your typical 4-bed home. To my mind, there remains a single material item to review today. Have we struck the correct balance between suitable scale and mass aligned to planning policy whilst ensuring our future homes are fit for purpose? Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Now Imogen Shepherd-Dubey, who's Borough Councillor for Embrook Ward.
Hi there. I think I'm speaking on behalf of the Town Council today, but okay. I kind of object to what the previous speaker said because he said homes are getting larger. Actually, the new houses I've seen on our estates are much smaller than the older houses that we have around here, and I'm afraid I can't agree with that statement. But my main concern, I'm very pleased to see that the loft conversion has gone on this house, or it's switched down to one room, which to me is a loft conversion rather than a whole floor, which is what was presented in the previous application. My only really remaining concern is the building is quite large compared to its neighbouring buildings, and the height of the building obviously is in dispute still, and it looks as though it's going to be quite tall. But that is really the only remaining comments left, and everything else has been said, so I'll leave that alone. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Imogen. Right, members, over to you. And we have 2 members remote as well. Have to take into account. Let's go to Sam first.
Thank you, Chair. My question, I mean, having observed the site, I mean, I think looking at the plans and the height, I think it seems very reasonable to me. When I sort of examined the street scene, I think I felt that, you know, the sort of plans proposed here would be in line with what else is there in the area. Concern question I only had was quite a small one, but I was keen to know what precautions would be made with regards to sort of flooding from, you know, sort of surface water precipitation, because we noticed that there is quite a big slope there. So I just wanted to know if there'd been any sort of precautions or any sort of flooding mitigation at all done in regards to this development.
Thanks. Can we get a comment on the flooding, please?
Yeah, thanks, Sam, for the question. So the drainage officer, we have received further clarification from them. And following that, condition 4 has been amended. So condition 4 has been amended, and the applicant will need to submit further details under that condition. The drainage officer is satisfied that the condition will ensure all matters regarding any surface water runoff or flooding are covered within that.
Okay, Sam.
Thanks, Bowdy.
Andrew.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've noted all of the changes made to this application since we last saw it in October, including the additional information provided by the drainage officer, and a fairly extensive condition 4 was my view. So thank you for that. But I thought that I had sorted out in my own mind the issue to do with the height, you know, of the property. So, but I'm less certain now. Because tonight we've heard from Mr. Mather, who lives at number 162, and he says that 160 will be higher than 162. Didn't say by how much according to his calculations. The agent unequivocally states that it will be 1 metre lower, although I note on the drawings that the drawings show it would be 90 centimetres lower. I would just like the officers, please, to clarify: is there, in their view, any problem with the drawings still that we have been presented with? And if there were errors, would they be significant enough, you know, to really affect the street scene?
Boldy.
Sorry, do you want me to go now, or do you want an answer?
So I was asking Boldy for a response to that. Are we happy with the calculated heights on page 37 of the agenda?
Yes.
Okay. Morning.
Thank you, Chairman. I wonder if I can ask the planning officer about the storage in the roof, in the eaves. Obviously, it's been changed considerably, but I'm not quite sure now from the plans why it's got the roof lights there, or indeed how you access the storage. I just want to make sure that it's not ending up as another habitable room by the back door.
You just want to come in?
Yeah, I mean, there'll only be in the eaves. The roof lights have been removed.
Sorry, could you say that again? I didn't catch it.
Sorry, when you mentioned the roof lights on the side have been removed. It will only be stored in the eaves, to be honest. I think from the previous plan, the discussion over the hallway, etc., that's all being removed as well.
Sorry, Pauline, did you mean the roof lights front and rear?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that they remain as part of the proposal, but if you look at the actual usable amount of floor space, it's minimal. The applicant says it's for storage, and the actual available height in there would indicate that you could really realistically use it for storage. Small amounts would be of a reasonable height that you could use for accommodation, but I think realistically it's not a proper room.
And it's access through a hatch, is it, rather than stairs?
I think the floor plan, Baldeep, if you've got it, was showing that it was a stair going up there.
Sorry, yes, I was just getting the plans up. Yes, there will be stairs going up there.
So it's stair access with a roof light to rooms that are for storage only. What size is the usable bit to the right, which is the bit that worried me more than the bit on the left?
Baldeep, can you just share the floor plans if you can get them?
Yeah.
So you can see the roof floor plans on the right hand side there. So it's not a significant amount of space. If you compare it to, let's say, bedroom 4 or office, it's comparable to that sort of level of floor space.
Okay, Pauline. And Rochelle, who's remote.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions. Question number one is, which is the height is actually accurate? Because the applicant said one thing, the neighbor said another thing, and there seems to be a question about what heights are which. And I do agree with Pauline that normally loft storage is usually accessed by a hatch. That's what in my house it is. I don't have a stairwell going up to the stairway going up to the loft. And I do have a Velux window in there, but it's more to keep the damp out. And that's one of them, and it doesn't really look at anything that I can think of. So I'm just kind of figuring out why they want so many Velux windows up there. And it does seem like they would use, the space could be used as an office or something like that rather than storage. And how would we prevent that?
Rochelle, I think the question really is, if they did have a stairway that went up to the loft and they did use the loft, would that be harmful? I think the answer is no, it wouldn't be harmful.
Okay, Rochelle. I'll just add on the site visit. It's really not possible to see two houses at the same time looking from the front. So I find it difficult to see what is meant by a street scene in this case. Are there any other members wish to comment? If not, Carl. Sorry.
That's all right. I'm down here in the cheap seats, so it's easy to miss. Yeah, I wanted to clear up the relative height of the building, so I'm glad that's been confirmed that what's in here is correct. I'm happy with the way the street scene looks, as Sam mentioned. That seems to fit a bit better. It is still a very big house, but you know, I don't think it's harmful. And as Justin just said, it's not really harmful. The drainage stuff was worrying me as well. I think you've already said it, Baldeep, but I just like to confirm that condition 4 is not our standard kind of condition for drainage on a property. It's clearly been tailored to this and made a bit more onerous because of the issues here. So if you could confirm that, that'd be great.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say yes. Following the last committee, We did have further discussions with the drainage officer, so you are right, condition 4 has been amended for this proposal to ensure that all bases are covered in terms of surface water and drainage flooding issues.
Okay, thanks. The only other thing I was going to mention is what Mr. Maid has said about conditioning this to a maximum of 8.4 metres. One, is that feasible? And two, doesn't the application already do that by definition, because this is what we're allowing? So I just want to check that.
We wouldn't be able to add a condition that restricts the height, but there will be a condition which says that the proposal has to be built according to the approved plan. So the approved plans obviously have a height of 8.4, so that's how we would follow it through.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure that effectively we're doing that already. So thank you.
Thank you. See nobody else wishing to speak, and no one remote. So I'll go to the recommendation on page 9 with conditions. None of the conditions has changed. Can I see those in favour of approving this application, please? That is approved unanimously. Thank you very much. We move on to the next application, which is land off Meldreth Way in Lower Earley. And Senjuti Manor is the case officer. We had a site visit here last Friday, as we did for the previous application. So over to you, Senjuti. Good evening.
Good evening, Chair. Thank you very much. Please bear with me when I load the presentation. Can you see? Okay, yes. So this application number is 211686, full planning application for the proposed construction of a food store, 43 number dwellings and associated accesses, servicing, parking and landscaping. The application is presented to Planning Committee at the request of the Assistant Director of Place-Based Services. This is the site location plan. The site is located to the north of Lower Earley Way and to the west of its junction roundabout with Meldreth Way. Existing residential estates of Wycham Close, Chatteries Way, and Bassett Close of Lower Earley Settlement occupy the northern side of the site. Public open space of Swallows Meadow is to the west of the site. This is the proposed layout plan. The retail unit is proposed on the eastern part of the site with a new access from Meldreth Way. Residential development is proposed on the western half of the site with a new access of Chatteries Way. 2 multifunctional open spaces are included within the proposed layout. This is the aerial view of the site as of 2019. And this is the aerial view with the proposed layout superimposed. This is the photograph of the site from Bassett Close amenity area. This is a photograph showing the location of the retail unit and the existing houses in Wycham Close. And this is a photograph that shows the location of the proposed residential development in relation to the existing houses within the existing residential estate surrounding the site. One of the key issues with the proposal is its conflict with the Wokingham Council's current development plan policies. The site is within designated countryside, not allocated for development. Consequently, policy CP11 applies. The proposal doesn't fall into any of the exceptions listed in the policy text of CP11. Due to its countryside location, the proposal is contrary to policies CC02, CP9, CP11, and CP17. The lawful use of the site is amenity open space, and this is secured by a condition of the original outline permission of Lower Earley. The proposal will result in loss of open space, contrary to policies CC03, TB08, and NPPF paragraph 99. The retail unit will be outside of any town centre location, contrary to policy CP13, and the proposal will result in additional trips. Additional consumer goods floor space for Lower Early has already been considered in policy CP19 for south of M4 SDL, and there is an oversupply of comparison goods retail floor space within the borough. The proposal is clearly contrary to multiple policies of the development plan and is unacceptable in principle. One of the key aspects of the development plan's spatial strategy is to maintain and enhance the natural and local environment. The proposal will be contrary to this aim. The site is within designated countryside and on the edge of settlement boundary. The Borough Design Guide SPD requires each such sites to demonstrate a transitional character between built-up areas and the open countryside. The proposal will not conform to this guidance. The proposed residential density would be 34.4 dwellings per hectare. That will be significantly higher than the residential densities of neighboring estates. While density is only a numerical measure, the significant increase is an indication of an overdevelopment of the site that will not reflect the transitional character. The high density development will also mean a cramped layout with dwellings that will be taller than the houses within the surrounding estates. In addition to high density development, the proposed apartment block will be significantly larger in terms of bulk, mass, and height compared to other dwellings in the neighborhood. It will be sited close to the terrace properties within Bassett Close, and together will result in a dominant feature that will appear incongruous when viewed from Swallow's Meadow public open space. The main multifunctional open space is provided at the far corner of the site and is not integrated within the site plan. The other negative aspect of the site planning is that it has been developed as an extrovert or inside-out plan, contrary to the introvert nature of the Lower Early layout. In the current proposal, dwellings front B3270 Lower Early Way. None of the existing estates has houses facing the main peripheral road. The proposal will introduce high-density residential and retail units within a hitherto undeveloped greenfield countryside land, resulting in urbanization and encroachment into countryside. In terms of the visual impact, the proposal will be clearly visible from Lower Early Way, particularly in winter, due to reduction in vegetation screening. In terms of the proposed site layout plan, the proposal has resulted in compartmentalization of the site. Green spaces are pushed to the boundaries with tight layout of residential units in the middle. The site layout doesn't read as a cohesive plan. The layout also offers limited space for additional landscaping, particularly in the front gardens. For the plots on the northern boundary, existing trees have been included within the future residential gardens. This will result in future pressure on these trees to be crown lifted and even would require their removal. The design of the retail unit is at odds with the building typology of the surrounding area. The retail building will appear as a landmark building by virtue of its mass, bulk, footprint, and height. The Borough Design Guide SPD says that landmark buildings are inappropriate in the edge of settlement locations. The proposal will be contrary to this recommendation. So overall, the proposal will have a harmful impact on the character of the area by virtue of introducing permanent development features within a greenfield land. In terms of trees and landscapes, following the mass removal of existing trees in a pre-application site preparation attempt, a TPO was served covering the entire site. The site forms part of Wokingham Borough Landscape Character Area A2, Loddon River Valley, which is included as a valued landscape in the local plan update topic paper. The character of Lower Early Way, this road, is heavily influenced by the vegetation within the river valley, which provides a tree-lined route that is visually and physically separated from the settlement edge. The application site forms part of the landscape character, as can be seen in this photograph. So the site lies further behind these trees on the left-hand side. The proposal includes significant removal of existing vegetation, including complete removal of these trees near the junction of Meldeth Way and Lower Early Way. This will not only have a negative impact on the overall landscape structure, with the reduction of tree cover, the retail unit will be readily conspicuous and will appear as an intrusive feature within the street scene. Currently, landscape on either side of Lower Early Way present a continuous stretch that will be fragmented by the introduction of the proposed development. In terms of residential amenity, so there will be impacts, there will be overlooking impacts, not on the existing dwellings, but between the proposed units. So the proposed apartment block and the separation from that with the plot 23 is only 12.2 meters. And the apartment block would have a second floor habitable dormer window. So there is be a clear overlooking impact between these two units. The retail unit will be within 10 meters from the rear amenity areas of 4, 6, and 7 Wycham Close. The building will present a continuous mass along the property boundary, blocking the outlook and will appear overbearing to these neighbors. And then there are issues with noise disturbance, as proposal will introduce a retail use that will include continuous comings and goings all throughout the day, with parking, loading, and general conversations between shoppers within 10 meters of the boundary with the existing dwellings at Wycham Close. It will have a significant noise disturbance. The proposed public open space between the residential and the retail use will be within 5 meters from the rear amenity space of proposed plot 10 and 6 meters from its habitable windows to the front. This unit will experience a constant noise disturbance. The ground and first floor flats of the apartment block will experience noise disturbance from the public open space to the west. An existing dwelling at 11 Chatteries Way will experience a noise disturbance from the new axis of residential development. Finally, all new units fronting B3270 will experience a constant traffic noise. We have seen that during our last week's site visit. Overall, the proposal will not result in a high-quality residential amenity and will have harmful impact on neighboring amenities. The proposal also will have highways issues. The proposal has multiple issues relating to highway safety. So the swept path assessment for the proposed access to the retail unit shows that a 16.5 meter HGV will slightly encroach over the center line to the opposite side. At the time of writing the committee report, the applicant hadn't provided road safety audit report, additional information on improvements of the existing bus stops, and traffic impact assessment for some of the junctions. These have now been provided and they're currently under review. However, highways officers have not officially withdrawn their objections yet. Another major issue with the proposal is its impact on ecology. Structurally, the site forms part of Swallows Meadow and is linked to the existing green corridor along the northern side of Lower Early Way. The mass clearing of vegetation had taken place in November-December 2020, prior to carrying out the ecological survey that has been submitted with the application. For this reason, the officers consider that the baseline ecological value of the site, as provided in the ecology report, is highly likely to be much lower than the pre-clearing value. The council's ecology officer considers that the proposal will result in loss of badger foraging habitat that will force the badgers to cross the road more frequently, increasing the risk of road mortality. The proposal will also result in loss of bat foraging habitat, and the development is likely to cause a net loss of bird habitat. But most importantly, the applicant hasn't provided any biodiversity net gain calculation. Biodiversity net gain is a measurable improvement for biodiversity within a site that aims to leave the natural environment in a measurably better state than it was beforehand. Whilst mandatory application of biodiversity net gain calculations to Town and Country Planning Act applications are yet to be finalized, it is reasonable for the Council to ask for it in accordance with both local and national policies. In the absence of a habitat biodiversity impact assessment calculator showing otherwise, the proposal is considered to result in a net loss of biodiversity. Other issues with the application includes lack of multiple planning obligations. These would have been secured using a Section 106 legal agreement if the application was recommended for approval. So the planning law requires that applications for planning permission be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. Currently, Wokingham Council has a policy compliant 5 years housing land supply with a 5% buffer. There are multiple policies with the current development plan that are consistent with the NPPF and relevant for determining the current application. For these reasons, tilted balance, as advocated in paragraph 11D of the NPPF, will not engage in this instance, and the application needs to be determined against the normal planning balance. For like all housing and retail developments, the proposal would bring some benefits, which include potentially sustainable location, provision of both market and affordable housing, and economic benefits arising from job creation, both by retail development as well as during construction phase. However, there are multiple harms that will arise from the proposed development. The proposal is clearly contrary to multiple policies of the current development plan, will have negative impact on the character of the area, will have significant impact on landscape character, including valued landscape, and impact on neighboring amenity and ecology. There are no other material considerations which are considered to outweigh this harm. For these reasons, the application is recommended for a refusal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sandraji. We have several speakers, and we begin with Jeff Littler from Early Town Council, who is speaking remotely.
Thank you, Chairman. Let me get my camera on. Right, can you? Yes, fine, thank you, Chairman. Chairman and members, I'm addressing you as Chairman of the Early Town Council's Planning Committee, and so on behalf of the Town Council as statutory consultee in relation to this application. Our Planning Committee, which acts under delegated powers and therefore is a sort of deciding on behalf of the Town Council, we had considered this application in June and then in October. The considerations leading to our consultation response to your council were, we think, balanced. We took account of the benefits of the proposal, as explained by the developers' agents, but we weighed these against the disbenefits in terms of impact. But in doing so, we had regard to professional advice from our planning advisor, and we had regard to the appropriate planning policies. Each of the 15 grounds of objection, a synopsis of which appears at pages 51 to 52 of your agenda report, was voted on separately and accepted unanimously by members of our committee. And we are pleased to note that many of our grounds of objection are now to be found to have been incorporated in the Planning Officer's recommendation now before you. I don't intend to go into the depth of all the details that have just been covered very well by your Planning Officer. I'll just turn to one or two central issues. As we know, we're operating under a plan-led system. The current development plan and proposals map clearly show that following, no doubt, a rigorous process that led it to its adoption, the land the subject of this application was not designated for development. It was designated as countryside, to be precise, part of a larger area designated as countryside, outside the settlement boundary, for reasons and for purposes elaborated upon in the Planning Officer's report and just referred to in her opening statement. Now, members, some of you perhaps come from rural parts of the borough and may have a particular view as to what is or is not countryside. But those views, I would suggest, are irrelevant. What is relevant here is the context of the use of that word in the policy and proposals map. Policy CP11 affords protection from development to land within that designation as countryside, unless it falls within specified designated exceptions. And your planning officer clearly states that this proposed development does not fall within any of those exceptions. The intention of the policy was and is that this land was to be kept in its natural state for the plan period, unless of course it fell within one of the exceptions, but it doesn't. From the time of the adoption of the development plan, indeed from the time when the lower area development was planned until the present time, this parcel of land has indeed, as a matter of fact, remained in its natural state, apart from some temporary degradation when the developer undertook some scrub clearance.
Can I ask you to come to a conclusion, please?
Yes. I would just mention that we put this forward, this land as proposed local green space in the first iteration of your local plan update. And it's interesting to note that in the second iteration of your local plan update, this piece of land is now proposed again for consideration as local green space designation.
Yes, thank you very much. I have to stop you there, Mr.
Yes, fine, thank you.
Thank you. Now, Malcolm Gaudreau, who is a neighbour, please, and he's with us here.
Hello. Yes. Good evening. Right. I would just, as a resident of Wycham Close, I'd like to say my name is Malcolm Gaudreau, and I've lived at number 3, Wycham Close, for the past 34 years, and my property sides onto Swallows Meadows by the gated entrance. I want to briefly present my experiences and concerns as a local resident, which I think are very similar to those of the 358 other local residents who've registered objections to this planning application. In all the time I've lived at my address, Swallows Meadows has always been an open green space, which was rich in plant and animal life. So you can imagine how I and many other people felt when a large area of the Swallows Meadows was cut down by the new owners of the land, and the proposal would also require even more vegetation to be cut back. Swallows Meadows has always been used by vast amounts of people for recreation over the 34 years that I've lived there. The previous owners never prevented anyone accessing the land, and in the early years, the gates were never locked. I would even say it seemed like the previous owners encouraged access because they cut the grass to maintain the pathways linking the green corridors along Lower Early Way. Regarding the ecology report, local residents found this report suspect. We have many different species of wildlife at Swallows Meadows, including deer, muntjac, fox, badger, bats, hedgehog. That's just to name a few. I have a few bullet points. And suitability. Meldriff Way is unsuitable for an entrance to a supermarket that potentially could see 138 cars trying to enter or leave a road that very often have cars far exceeding the speed limits, as I know from hearing them past my back garden on Meldriff Way. This also impacts on the danger of people trying to cross Meldriff Way. This could lead to a very serious accident or even worse. The proposed opening on Chatteris Way will also have an impact on safety, being close to a bend in the road. Congestion. With the proposed supermarket and more housing in the local area, will only add to the already congested roads, especially at peak times. The impact. This proposed supermarket would undoubtedly have a life-changing impact on people's lives that live in Wycham Close. This will be the size of the supermarket, the early opening and late closing times, also the noise it will create, the light late onto the evenings, the vehicle fumes of the car park, the large heavy good lorries in and out on unsociable hours. Residents will also lose their privacy they currently have, and not to forget the financial impact on house prices. Flooding. This is already happening in Chatteris Way and Wycham Close. That will only get worse. Even Thames Water mentioned that the current drainage system will not cope with the applicant's proposed plans. Just a quick summary. Why do we need another supermarket in a location that has other supermarkets very close by, like Sainsbury's, Asda's, Marks and Spencer's, Iceland's, Co-op, and with a 10 to 15 minute drive, you also have a Lidl's and Aldi's and a Morrison's and a Waitrose. Lower Early has very few green spaces left to enjoy, and we need to keep them green, not just for now, but for future generations.
Thank you, Mr. Goodrett. Thank you very much indeed. And now Andy Janssens, who's who's the applicant. And he's with us here. There we are. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm Andy Janssens. I'm principal of Janssens Property and a member of the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. Janssens Property, we've developed 25 projects in the Thames Valley over the past 19 years. In fact, I was before your committee in 2014 with a project on Peach Street and Cross Street opposite the Ship Pub, where I was also faced with a recommendation for refusal. And fortunately, the committee members supported my planning application, and we've now developed the block of flats on the corner, which I hope you'll agree vastly improves the entrance into Wokingham town centre. Low Early Properties is a subsidiary of Janssens Property, a wholly owned subsidiary, and we've already gone through the details of the 43 houses that we'll provide, 40% social housing, and the food store is actually pre-let to Lidl, so it's not an application with no occupier in mind, and we've had 600 letters of support. I'd like to also confirm the land is private. We acquired the freehold to the ownership from the University of Reading some time ago. And my view is it is an edge of settlement development. It is bounded by two roads, being Low Early Way and Meldress Way. It's not green belt, and it's an obvious infill site when you're considering development sites going forward. It's safe to say we've found officer feedback and timing of feedback challenging. Just to give you a few examples, in your report, it says that the height of the store is higher than the adjoining residential accommodation. It isn't. One of your reasons for refusal in front of you is a detrimental impact on acoustic amenity. But if you actually refer to page 50 of your report, you'll find that your environmental health officer has no objection. Equally, I've never actually been to a planning committee across all our 40 projects with a recommendation for refusal from highways, because we've always managed to sit down and sort out all the issues. The challenge we have here is that we haven't had sufficient time, nor has your highways officer had sufficient time to deal with the issues. So I find myself sitting in front of you with many technical points that are outstanding, many of which were raised in the committee reports, which I've had no opportunity to deal with. I always like to think our planning applications are dealt with on their planning merits, not technical issues which haven't been dealt with. And maybe I'm old-fashioned or maybe principled, but having allowed 2 extensions of time to your planning officer, we've respectfully requested an extension of time to deal with all the technical issues going forward. And that's where we stand. We respectfully request a deferral of the planning application so we can deal with as many issues as we can and come back to you with a planning application that's considered on planning principles. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Janssens. And finally, we have 2 local ward members, David Hare, Clive Jones, who are going to share the 3 minutes between them, gentlemen.
I live less than half a mile from the site. As you've seen, there are many reasons for refusal from Early Town Council and Wokingham Borough Council. And I won't bore you with these, I know that you can all read. But I'm going to focus on my main area of concern. Swallows Meadow, a piece of countryside on the southern edge of Early. The site is outside the settlement of Early and is designated countryside. Indeed, as has already been said, Early Town Council, before this planning idea was known about, asked for the area to become a local green space. It's going that way, protected countryside. And there is already a plan from Early Environmental Group to have a nature reserve along this corridor, running from the roundabout in Shinfield right down to Showcase Cinema. And this is part of that. This is included in this area. It is vital for our wildlife, biodiversity, and is a good carbon sink. Yes, the developers have destroyed much of the vegetation in at least part of the site, but remaining trees are now protected by a TPO, and the vegetation is, sometimes slowly, starting to regenerate. I've walked through the meadow for quite a time. I've seen deer, badgers, foxes, bats, There are loads of grasses where the little site is proposed. There was a very valuable scrubland where the housing is proposed. In addition, I've witnessed a plethora of insects, bugs, butterflies, and moths. It may not be a people-focused amenity area, but it's a valuable carbon sink and the wonderful wildlife area that, I believe, is an essential part of Early, with footpaths running across it that many residents use to enjoy nature and speed their walk.
Thank you. I live near the proposed development. It's in my ward. My constituents never expected a development in the countryside, which is their backyard. Views are not sacrosanct in planning law, but the proposal is overbearing. The store is a large high mass that will dominate the views of houses around the area. It will cause unacceptable noise throughout the day and have a detrimental impact on the area, with several homes having loss of acoustic privacy and amenity. A Facebook survey undertaken by myself and colleagues after the biased one arranged by the developers, we found that 82% of respondents did not want improved retail choices in Early and 79% did not want new homes. The planning documents before you advise of 57 people in favour of a development. 24 of those do not live in RG6, which is Early. There are 358 people objecting. Only 6 of them do not live in RG6. I hope the committee will reflect on this. This is an unacceptable development in the countryside that would only have a detrimental effect on the lives of my constituents. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Can I just pick up a couple of points that the applicant mentioned? That the height of the little store, the proposed height of the little store, saying we'd overestimate, or the officers had overestimated that in comparison with the housing. Could you comment on that, please, Judy?
Yes, so the little store height appears between 7 meters to 7.1 meters, which is lower than the heights of the residential dwellings nearby, which are between 7 and 7.5 meters. But it's not the height of the little store alone, it's the height of the residential units as well. The residential houses are significantly higher than the heights of the existing estates, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. And the comment that was made that there was no objection from the environmental health officer, how is that compatible with you stating that there is a noise problem?
So the environmental health officer reviewed the noise report produced by the applicants. The noise report assessed the noise in this area during lockdown when there was significant lower amount of traffic. And environmental health officer, even though they didn't raise any objection, requested multiple conditions, pre-commencement conditions, to have further information on the noise that will be expected from the proposed development. So keeping all this in mind, the officers think that there will be noise disturbance on the neighbours. It's been explained in the officer report.
Thank you very much. So we come to members. Angus. Bill. Angus.
Thank you, Chairman. I wasn't able to attend the site visit, but I have visited that site and I do know it quite well. There is clearly a considerable amount that the planning officers have offered up as reasons for refusal. And it does, as a side issue, strike me that refusals like this should come to committee almost by rote for local people to be able to see process. I've had cases in my own ward, and I would ask that that is reviewed in future. But coming back to this application, there was a case put by the planning officer about the impact of the economic, the retail offering, that the littles would affect that. And I wonder why that wasn't added as a reason for refusal. But I've got one major question, is that it does seem that we have good reason to support the officer's recommendation But I note at the top of the agenda item, the expiry date is the 15th of December. And I wonder whether this committee tonight does have the power, unless something is put into the recommendation, and also taking account of the consultants, that there are outstanding discussion issues, whether we should be actually determining it or whether there should be some caveat in the proposal to cover that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Could you comment on that, Sandriti? And also Angus was proposing another reason for refusal.
So the first one, the retail impact assessment. The applicant has provided a sequential test as well as a retail impact assessment. And based on these documents, they have demonstrated that there is no other alternative site. Now, the officers have questioned that the sequential test report because there is a site already included in policy, as I said, CP19 for the south of M4 SDL and the retail use of that SDL area. However, the applicant had said that it was not part of their catchment. So there is, it appears that they have considered the site, and because it was not part of their catchment, it's been excluded. That's one of the reasons why the retail impact wasn't considered as a reason for refusal on its own. However, the officers have questioned the sequential test. The other question from Angus was regarding deferring, and I do not think it's required today because the proposal is unacceptable in principle. So no matter how much of technical details we receive in future, that's not going to change. It's a proposed development in countryside on an unallocated land, so it will never be supported. So in my opinion, it's there is no reason to defer the decision to be made. Thank you.
Thank you. Presumably, if this were refused and were to go to appeal, if it's possible, we could some of the reasons for refusal could be removed when they were for highways, for example.
Yes, that's true. If the applicant wishes to appeal against the refusal, then we can work and try to resolve as many issues as possible to reduce the number of objections.
Thank you. Sam.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, looking at the report, I mean, I think it's very, very detailed. I would have liked to have seen a biodiversity net gain report. I think that would have been useful. But it's interesting. I think you said that the environmental agency didn't reject this. Other thing was a slight bit of a concern was I think when you mentioned the sort of the noise pollution, I think that's a bit of a concern, along with the fact that it appears here that the actual lorries on the road would actually overbear the central line, which could lead to a risk of increased, risk of mortality given if someone's, to the drives on the opposite side of the road or potential cyclists. So that's really a bit of a concern from my point.
Okay. Did you want an answer to that? Okay. Fine. Bill.
Thank you, Chairman. My concern is noise and vehicle movements. I've looked through the pack here. My concern is heavy goods vehicles actually delivering to the site, and I don't know whether it's in there somewhere hidden away or whether it's a condition that we could make, should this be approved, that there is a restriction on the timings of heavy goods vehicles entering the site and leaving the site. The other point with noise is the positioning of the mechanical plant. It's not close to number 7, but if this is, I'm assuming this is all ground plant. It's not actually raised. If it is raised, it makes the situation even worse. And although the environmental report says that there is no reason to suggest that the noise is a problem from this, I have experience of refrigeration equipment, and if they've taken the manufacturer's specifications on noise, that's fine when it's new, but as refrigeration equipment gets older, it gets noisier. So it would want to be regularly monitored if this was to go ahead. So that's my concerns, is the vehicle movement and the noise from the plant.
Okay, but if we get a proposal to approve, we can come to those proposed conditions as well. Rochelle, remotely.
I have a very interesting question. This is a very interesting idea that you refuse, that the borough is saying to refuse this application because of all these reasons. However, the borough has some hypocrisy in trying to propose their own housing in Winnish Farm. That's also in the same kind of area outside the settlement boundary, but that's okay. So I would like to know why one is okay and one isn't.
We're not discussing Winnish here, Rochelle.
I know that, but it's just that I want to see about the hypocrisy of it and understand why. Maybe the officer can tell me why one is okay, but one isn't.
Well, I don't know if the officer wants to comment on this particular.
Rochelle, sorry,
I don't think it's right to talk about two applications.
Sorry,
Okay.
yeah, but Rochelle, we have to focus on the application we're determining now.
Pauline.
Thank you, Chairman. I know this area very well as well, and I went on the site visit. I think a lot of the objections the officer has mentioned are absolutely correct. The area is a clear continuation of a green band along the peripheral road. I'm very concerned that the new houses that are being proposed are right up against the peripheral road with very little gap. That road is very noisy. It's very busy. People drive very fast on it. People do race on it at night. I can certainly hear them from where I live, and I'm quite a long way away from that, so that's going to be very noisy for people living in those houses. In addition, it's also used as a primary diversion route whenever the M4's got a problem, so it gets massive amounts of lorries and really heavy traffic, which I think makes the noise impact on those proposed houses worse. I also have a lot of sympathy with the local residents. That proposed store is very, very close to existing houses who bought their houses with a green area going down to a peripheral road next door to them. And I don't think it is fair or correct to allow a very large industrial unit, which is what it looks like, right against their houses. And finally, I think it will drag quite a lot of traffic in from elsewhere. We've seen already that the people in favour of the development seem to live in Reading, in Guildford, in Wokingham, in all over the place. Well, either they've got no reason to be interested in this store, or they're going to drive there from Reading and Guildford and Wokingham and wherever else and gum the whole place up with additional traffic. So that's my final comment.
Okay, I don't think there was a question there was Pauline. Thank you. So, Carl.
Okay, I do have a couple of questions. Just thinking back to what Angus said, really, I agree with his point about refusals coming before us for large, major applications like this. I'm just interested to know why this one came to us, where obviously others haven't. So just a straight explanation of that, really, why that came to us. I think it's a good idea, so I'm not going to complain. And also, my second question is, the original low early planning application, which was referred to, from 1977, said the site would eventually be transferred to WDC ownership as it was at the time. So I'm just confirming, obviously that didn't happen because we're being told here that somebody else owns the freehold. So is that simply a problem at the time that the council just didn't ask for it? It seems that they didn't do it within a time limit. Is that correct?
The officers couldn't figure out what actually happened at that point of time because there are no paperworks available. So what I could find out was that somehow this land wasn't conveyed to Wokingham Council, and we are now out of time to pursue any enforcement action against this breach. And I have explained that in the report in detail. Do you want me to explain it to you again? What are the possible actions we can take now?
I think I'm okay. I just wanted to kind of make sure that's kind of what happened, that it was either an oversight or actually you're saying we don't know. That's fine. We don't know. We don't know. But the other question about the reason for having this in front of the committee.
It was Assistant Director of Place requested the application be determined by Planning Committee.
Yeah, it was brought to my attention, and I thought with it being a major application with a lot of supporters and a lot of objectors and a lot of complications, it would be better to bring it to committee. I'm glad that 2 members support that. Perhaps something, as Angus suggested, we consider in the future. Other large applications which are recommended for refusal.
Okay, I've got a few comments, so I'll go on with that. But yeah, I think it's a really good idea for especially for ones like this, which are controversial. And this is one of the most controversial ones. I've only been here for nearly 4 years, and I can only remember the East Reading MRT being more kind of controversial and have more objectors and supporters. Talking about support, it's already been touched on that, you know, there's 57 letters of support, but about 40% of them are from outside RG6, as Councillor Jones said, which is something I totted up as well. And even many of those are actually not even from more local than that. They're kind of from Reading and some of them from Tilehurst, I noticed. So it's a bit strange that, because I wonder why people in those areas would be bothered about this. And I guess that's come from the PR leaflet thing, which is mentioned, which got 636 supporters. And I think that was carried over a very wide area. And I suspect that's where these letters came from. Certainly many of the supporters out of that 636 were also from quite a distance away. I got one, and here it is. I didn't fill it in, as you can see, because I knew I'd be sat here one day and wanted to keep it for a reference. But it clearly says a new Lidl for Lower Early, and talks all about the food store. There's a slight mention of the homes, 43 new homes, but then it's really all about the food store. And it only offers show your support, is what it says on the back. So if you put your name on this, you're showing your support. Even if you write your name on it and then swear across it, as I suspect some people may have done, considering there were 358 objection letters, then those have not been counted. They certainly haven't been told to the council, as far as I'm aware. So I find that, I think one of the objectors referred to that as being unethical, and I kind of agree with that. However, it's not a planning issue, but I just thought it's interesting to note. The applicant's got some main points in this report, and it basically talks about the area not being protected by previous planning conditions. That seems to be a matter of discussion. Obviously, the council says that it is. I tend to go along with that. I think we have to kind of take planning restrictions and say that we have to follow them. Obviously, a court may think differently, but at no point has anybody mentioned that there's some kind of legal agreement here or legal point that's been thrown out. So I think that's something that will have to happen if it has to. It talks about the habitat survey, saying there's no important ecological features on site. Well, that survey took place after it was mown down, so it's not quite a surprise that we should see most of it gone. It referred to the food store being an essential choice for food retail sites, and of course, in planning law, if there is no access to a food store, that becomes essential and it becomes a material consideration. I think we've all heard, and as a local myself, I live about a mile, maybe less, from this site. There's really no essential need for a food store there. Not to say that having a choice isn't a good idea. It is, but in planning terms, it's irrelevant. And it says there'll be no highway issues. Well, that might be true, but it's clear that hasn't been agreed with our transport people. And I know that road very well. I run down it often, and I drive down it a lot. And I also take the left turn off Lower Early Way into Meldrum. And most people who drive that drive quite fast and almost use it like a slip road, slowing down before they get to the junction with Carshalton, Chatsworth. And so, you know, that where that entrance is seems to be worrying to me. And of course, we don't know whether that's a problem or not because we've not had time to deal with it before this application is flown in. You know, so that's pretty much the applicant's case, and none of it really adds up to me. And then on the other side, you've got all the things that, you know, are being used as reasons for refusal. The site, you know, is certainly part of that green corridor, which, you know, most of us know quite well. While I've been on this committee, I've noticed how often, and it's infuriating to me, and I think it's infuriating to a lot of people, where some bit of development happens and then it becomes the precedent for that area. I'm particularly bothered about it in my ward with people paving over their front gardens, which were nice and made the street look all nice and green. And now it's just like a mouth missing teeth, really, where there's gardens paved over. And when the next person comes along and wants to do it, I sit in here and moan about it, and the planning officers say, well, number 52's got one like that, and number 87 has. So, how can you stop it? And that's fair, how can we be saying to one person in the street, you can't do that? And here we've got a long green corridor that goes all the way from the showcase down past, past the Pinsons Wood and further on down to Shinfield. This is an area I know really well, and I'm running in it all the time, even in winter. And we, I think once we fill in one little bit of it, even if we, chose to do that, the rest is going to go, or the bits of it that aren't flooded, because some of it is. Clearly this is, as Mr. Is it Goodrow said, this site's been used for decades as open space. It was set as open space. So yeah, I find it difficult to see how they thought they were going to make this happen. Anyway, to sum up, the council stated kind of 9 reasons for refusal. Now, a couple of those are kind of procedural and will be sorted by legal agreement. The road safety one probably could be sorted out depending on the design of the access and agreement. And I think, substantial changes to design, could result in an application which might be feasible. But I reckon there's at least 4 of those reasons which, in my opinion, wouldn't be resolvable by any application for residential or retail development on this site. And so on that basis, I think I'm minded to refuse this.
Thank you, Carl. I think there are 2 questions at the beginning which were answered, and you didn't have a further question, I think. And Pauline.
Thank you. What Carl said just made me think of a couple of questions, actually. The first thing was for Sanjuti. She said that we were out of time to transfer this land to the Borough Council. I just wanted to know when that time elapsed, what the date was. And then the second one was the comment from the applicant about wanting more time to talk to highways. I mean, my recollection of this planning application is it's been in or about, starting with the removal of all the trees, for about a year. So I'm not quite sure why in a year we couldn't resolve the questions that are now being raised.
Well, I guess the council would say it hadn't received the information it needed to do so, but Sanjuti, comment on that.
Do you want me to answer the highways question first or the other one?
Yes, if you like.
Okay, I'll start with the highways. So the highways officers from the council have been talking to the applicant's highways officers for over a year now, almost for a year. And I'm still not sure why these things were not resolved. What I understand, probably Chris will be able to explain better, but what I understand is that there were outstanding information coming from the applicant side. We haven't received all information, so highways were not completely sure about the outcome of this application, and that's the reason why they have objected. But there is a high possibility that this objection could be resolved by additional information. Probably Chris will be able to explain better. And as for the legal agreement, so the original legal agreement was signed in 1977, and it had included a covenant that the land should have been handed over to the council within 10 years of the completion of the legal agreement, that is by 1987, which didn't happen. Now, for enforcement action to be taken against this breach, there is a clause which kind of suggests that after 12 years from the date by which this should have been completed, that is by 1987, after 12 years from that date, beyond that, enforcement actions cannot be taken. So since it's already beyond 1999, we cannot take any enforcement action against the breach. However, that doesn't mean that no other action can be taken. Perhaps an injunction is possible, but we are not very sure at this moment. So we're still talking to the council's legal department to explore any other possible options for this. Thank you.
Okay. Nobody else. Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon, Chris. Yep.
Sorry, no, it was only, I was asked just to kind of update. So I think from a highways perspective, obviously the officer has been looking at this he's drawn up a kind of a summary for us to understand, and there's 10 items in total that are that have been drawn down from the conclusion of what's been looked at. From those 10 items, 4 are identified to be red, as we've rag statused them. 5 are amber, and the remaining are green. So obviously some have been approved and can work forward. But some of my understanding from speaking to the officer who's dealt with the detail is some of the last bits of information only came in 2 days ago. So we probably just haven't had the time to turn this around to get the last few items checked to confirm ahead of committee. But so obviously the refusal reason that was drafted at the time of the report still stands. We may be able to remove them, but obviously that couldn't be done by tonight. So that's where we currently stand, and the recommendation still stands.
Sorry, Chris, can I just jump in to explain a bit of process? So it's often the case on these sorts of refusals that some are technical reasons and they're just not dealt with in time, and they often fall away before appeal. And that, potentially that is what will happen on some of the reasons here. But there are other reasons that relate to matter of principle, so that there's no amendments to the scheme that are going to overcome our in principle reasons, if you like. So no matter whether highways issues are resolved tonight, tomorrow, or in 6 months' time, there'll still be the reasons for principle. So our recommendation is likely to have been refusal, irrespective of the highways.
Thank you, Justin. Okay, seeing no one else wishing to speak, there's no alternative proposal. So we'll go to the recommendation on page 45, which is a recommendation for refusal with 9 reasons for refusal. I see those in favour of refusing this application, please. That's unanimous. Unanimous. Thank you, members. That application is refused. Now we move on past Towtley over to St Anne's Manor on page 159. Yes, need to get Andrew back. Okay, welcome back, Andrew. So we're on page 159 now, west of St Anne's Manor. Joanna Carter is the case officer here, so over to Joanna. Good evening for your presentation.
Good evening and thank you, Chair. Right, could you please let me know if you can see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Brilliant, thank you. This is application number 203544, land to the west of St Anne's Drive and south of London Road. The application seeks full planning permission for the erection of 54 dwellings, including 19 affordable homes, together with associated access from St Anne's Drive, landscaping and open space. The application site is located south of London Road and west to St Anne's Drive, approximately 2 kilometers east of Wokingham town centre and 3.5 kilometers west of Bracknell town centre. Montague Park development for up to 650 units and associated sang lie to the west, and its construction is approaching completion. To the north lies Keep Hatch Gardens development for 300 dwellings, which is also almost complete. Bracknell Forest Council administrative boundary runs to the south of the site, as shown with a black line. To the east, there is a protected woodland, St Anne's Manor Hotel, offices and residential dwellings. I will start with the position in relation to principle of development in this area. The Council's vision for the borough is set out in the core strategy and provides for majority of residential development to be in 4 strategic development locations, SDLs. One of these, South Wokingham SDL, includes application site within its boundary. And North Wokingham SDL lies immediately north. Together, SDLs form an urban extension to the major development location of Wokingham. It is in those SDLs that the core strategy seeks to concentrate development to facilitate comprehensive planning of development and delivery of infrastructure to support it. The area marked with an orange broken line was allocated in core strategy for 2,500 dwellings. Core strategy policies are further amplified by supplementary planning documents, SPDs in short. The South Wokingham SDL SPD contains a preferred spatial framework plan shown in this slide. This is a high-level strategy for how and where development might take place. The anticipated locations of residential development are marked in yellow, and the indicative areas of open green space are marked in green. However, the SPD highlights that its framework plan is of illustrative nature only, with areas of open space and residential development described as potential. The SPD acknowledges that the quantum, along with the exact development areas, are to be refined through discussions with the local planning authority and through master planning process. The red polygon shows broadly the area of potential residential development in the framework plan. The application site lies within an area shown in the framework plan as potential green open space. This area is also defined as countryside. This slide shows development limits and boundary of major development location of Wokingham in purple. The north and south Wokingham SDLs are marked in orange. The potential future development envisaged in illustrative SPD frameworks is shown in red. The indicative nature of the SPD framework is evidenced through a number of planning applications where development within designated countryside, but within SDL, was permitted. These are, for example, Bell Farm, Ashridge Farm, and Keep Hutch Beach developments in North Wokingham SDL, and Phase 2A and in part Phase 2B in South Wokingham SDL, south of the railway. Similar to these applications, the proposal site was envisaged in the SPD as potential open space, but is now proposed to deliver residential development instead. It should be noted that this area is not required by future development south of the railway to provide open green space, and therefore there is no requirement to safeguard it for this purpose. The total number of consented dwellings in South Wokingham SDL is approximately 2,450 against the 2,500 anticipated for South Wokingham SDL. This means that together with the proposed scheme, the total would be slightly over 2,500. Notwithstanding, the Council can demonstrate in excess of the requirement of 5-year housing land supply without this scheme. The site was put forward in the local plan update call for sites process and was previously assessed as having capacity for 81 dwellings. The local plan update allocates this site for 54 dwellings, in line with the current proposal. The local plan update is still at a fairly early stage of preparation and therefore attracts only limited weight in planning terms. Notwithstanding this, The National Planning Policy Framework is clear that sustainable development proposals on unallocated sites should only be refused where they would be so substantial as to undermine the plan-making process. As such, windfall development sites are not precluded and may emerge following the adoption of local plans, as has been the case during the current local plan period and as shown in the slide in front of members. This slide shows the application site's location within the settlement gap between Wokingham and Bracknell, with SDL residential development in purple, that's Montague Park, and orange, Keep Hatch Beach or Keep Hatch Gardens. The park and ride currently under construction is shown in blue. Highlighted in green are areas of open space or landscape features which benefit from a special status. To the west and south of the site lies Buckhurst Meadows, which by virtue of being a sang will be retained as such in perpetuity. Ancient woodland further south forms part of St. Anne's sang, and again it will be retained in perpetuity given it is to mitigate development south of the railway. This sang will extend up to the western boundary of A329M. To the east, the site abuts protected woodland and a number of residential dwellings and St. Anne's Manor Hotel located further east. East of A329M, there is currently under consideration an application which seeks to designate this area as public open space, but it is yet to be determined. In summary, the site is well contained physically and visually, and it is not considered that the proposal would lead to coalescence of settlements, whether visual or physical. This slide shows the location of nearby amenities and infrastructure. Near the site, there are 3 schools, Floriat at Montague Park, Keep Hatch Primary and St. Crispin's Secondary. The location of the development would allow easy and safe access to facilities within walking distance to the primary school, retail and community uses, including local shop, allotments, play areas and public house. There are bus stops located adjacent to the site along A329 London Road. The location is no different to Keep Hatch Gardens development to the north and is considered sustainable. The slide shows views onto site's northern boundary from Keep Hatch Gardens bus stop in photo 1 and views from St. Anne's Drive bus stop towards Cockpit Beach roundabout with Keep Hatch Gardens development in photo 2. These are views from the centre of the site towards northwest and west. There is visible a hedgerow forming the boundary with Buckhurst Meadow Sang, a tree line along A329 London Road, and the roof line of Keep Hatch Gardens development. Here are views from the centre of the site towards southwest, showing hedgerow and single-storey structures presently associated on site with the current site use. South, the views south along the eastern boundary show the boundary with existing dwellings. And here are views of the southern section towards the ancient woodland and the railway which lies beyond. Photo number 2 shows Manege area and the stabling block located in the centre of the site. The scheme would create new links with Buckhurst Meadow Sang, and it would upgrade one of its footpaths, shown in purple, thus creating a safe, attractive and quiet alternative route for residents of this and neighbouring sites to reach amenities of Montague Park, including school play areas and a shop. The proposed route would link to the SDR, therefore helping to successfully integrate the site with South Wokingham SDL and connect North and South SDLs. The site layout has been guided predominantly by the existing landscape features such as mature vegetation along the boundaries, protected trees, and a watercourse running across the site, as well as proximity to A329 London Road and Buckhurst Meadow Sand. The proposal would include open space area incorporating an informal area of play in the north. Following officer comments, the northern section of the site has been revised to achieve a well-defined frontage with high quality of design and contemporary character, good level of surveillance of public open space, and improved legibility. Officers negotiated lower density and a reduced number of units given the constrained nature of the site. This resulted in a higher quality amenity space for future occupiers and reduced pressure on boundary trees and hedgerows. The site would transition into a quieter character to the south with more detached dwellings and more informal layout, offering landscape buffer to the protected woodland south and east. Majority of the proposed dwellings would be two-story houses. The design approach incorporates traditional forms and detailing found in the local area, with visual interest being added through chimneys, bay windows, hanging tiles in gable elevations, and brick detailing around windows. As a result of discussions with officers, the northern section, including the apartment block, has been amended. The current design would offer more contemporary architectural style to replicate what was built at Montague Park, with dwellings characterized by symmetry and vertical repetition. All flats would have at least one balcony, which would be generous in size. These would be integrated into the facade of the building. It is considered that the proposal represents a high-quality development which would integrate well and be compatible with the surrounding area. In summary, the site is located within the SDL and both benefits from and contributes to its associated infrastructure. It is considered to be a sustainable site which would successfully integrate with the surrounding area. It provides significant public and environmental benefits, including 35% on-site affordable housing, that is 19 homes, benefits relating to improving a variety or choice of pedestrian and cycle linkages between SDLs, as well as with town centre, upgrading Buckhurst Meadow Sand footpath, providing enhancements and improvements to keep Hatch Meadows Sand, as well as delivering sustainability measures well over and above what is currently required. The application is therefore being recommended for approval, subject to conditions and securing Section 106 obligations. I would draw members' attention to the supplementary agenda, which includes a list of drawings to be approved, reference to drawings or plans within the wording of two conditions, and an additional condition. Clarification is also provided in relation to Natural England's position and housing and economic land availability assessment. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. We have three speakers, all virtual. First of all, David Stack, who is a neighbour. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Thank you and good evening. So my name is David Stack and I'm speaking on behalf of the local residents in opposition to this development. This planning application was started over 6 years ago and previous versions have been refused, appealed by the developer and eventually withdrawn on the strength of the council's recommendation. It has generated over 300 objections online by local residents. There are four main reasons why this application should be rejected. But for consistency, application 211686 Meldrith Way, which has just been refused for exactly the same reasons I'm about to mention. Therefore, in order to stay consistent, I suggest this application should also be refused. So the first of these four is countryside. The application site currently lies within designated countryside. I'll just say that again. The application site currently lies within designated countryside. Core Strategy Policy CP11 proposals outside development limits, including countryside,
states that proposals outside of development limits, including within countryside, will not be permitted unless one of the exceptions applies. None of the exceptions apply in this circumstance, and therefore development should not and cannot be permitted. This one point alone should be enough to reject this application. However, point number 2, settlement boundary. As Joanna just showed, the development actually sits outside of the current settlement boundary of Wokingham. It also fails to demonstrate how it would maintain the separation between Wokingham and Bracknell to prevent harm to the visual amenities of the local area, which is contrary to core strategy policy CP21 and the South Wokingham Strategic Development Plan. Point number 3, the strategic development plan itself clearly shows that the site is not allocated for development as shown by Joanna's diagram. It is not part of the South Wokingham SDL plans for housing, and as such was identified to be retained as open green space to contribute the settlement separation between Bracknell and Wokingham. Approving this application is therefore contrary to the strategic plan. Housing supply has been referenced a few times this evening. The council's latest assessment is that based at 31st of March 2020, the council is able to demonstrate a 5.23-year housing supply. Furthermore, with the addition of 3 further large-scale developments that have been updated in the new updated local plan, the council does not need to approve further small-scale developments such as this one. So to summarise, it's in designated countryside and doesn't fulfil any of the exceptions. It is outside of settlement boundary and it is not on a site designated for development within the strategic development plan, and the council can already demonstrate over 5 years of housing supply. So in conclusion, for consistency, application 211686 has just been refused for exactly the same 4 reasons I just mentioned. This one is a development, it's in countryside, it's outside of settlement on unallocated land. On its own merit, therefore, it should, and to stay consistent with your previous decision, this application should also be refused. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now Kay Collins, who is the agent. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you very much. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you this evening. The application before you is the culmination of many months of consultation and discussion between officers and the applicant. These discussions have had a positive impact on the proposals originally put forward by the applicant and have resulted in the development for houses which will positively contribute to the local area and will benefit from sustainability and good access created by the continuing development of the South Wokingham SDL. The proposals are supported by a very well written and comprehensive officers' report which identifies the significant benefits of these proposals and which I summarise here. The site is well contained with an appropriate buffer and will not lead to the coalescence of Wokingham and Bracknell. It is a well-planned development of 54 dwellings set in a series of areas of linked open spaces. The access and junction is approved by the highways officers and has passed a road safety audit. The layout has been significantly amended to achieve an approved relationship with the A329 and residential development to the north. There are more substantial open space areas along the northern frontage to enable further mitigation and integration with the surrounding landscape. Walking and cycle routes are provided to the wider area within the development, which has been missing up till now. The development is at a significantly lower density than those on the surrounding sites, 16 dwellings per hectare here, compared with an assumed density in the STL of between 25 and 30. A majority of the proposed dwellings would have 3 or 4 bedrooms, which is in keeping with the rural interface character areas located on this edge of settlement site and which offers a good balance in this location. Importantly, the affordable housing provision includes a high proportion of much needed houses with some 2-bedroom properties to reflect local need. A form of development along the northern frontage of the site that is of high quality of design and contemporary character. The development will enable improved connections not only from the site to the facilities in Montague Park, but will also facilitate better access to the development for the benefit of the wider community. The location of the development is considered to be sustainable and would allow easy and safe access to facilities within walking distances to primary schools, retail community uses, including the new community centre and local shops, allotments and a public house. As you've seen, there are bus stops located adjacent to the site along the A329 London Road. While some trees will be removed, there will be an overall net gain in trees across the site, along with 10% biodiversity net gain. The proposals incorporate a significantly higher number of electric vehicle charging points than currently required, and it would achieve at least double reduction in carbon emissions as well. The proposals will generate significant SIL and Section 106 contributions. I thank you for your time this evening, and I ask you to fully consider the officer's report in front of you and approve the application. Many thanks.
Thank you very much. And finally, Peter Dennis, who's Borough Council for West Scotland.
Hello, thank you. This plan was rejected before and should be rejected now. Many residents and Wokingham Town Council have objected for a slew of reasons covered by David. There are several grounds for rejection. This is outside the current local plan document and the area is marked as green space. Indeed, the officer's supporting documentation says this. I'll quote, "Whilst the site is located within designated countryside and does not satisfy any of the exceptions set out in the core strategy policy CP11, though it does go on to make some excuses. I do note, as per David, that the previous application just discussed to this one has been refused based upon the same reasons this application should be refused. The presumptive usage of the existing heavily used sangs and the need to destroy TPO hedges to provide access to the sang is dubious at best. Mention is made of using Keep Hatch and the Bracknell sang. Boundary between Bracknell and Woking comes to question there, but these require crossing a 6-lane main road. No one will do that. The previous application included rejection because of a lack of sang provision. This is a gateway entrance into Wokingham, providing a good green view into town. The removal of many trees to provide access to the site will destroy this. Rather than seeing trees backed by fields, just another road with houses. The previous application had this as one reason to reject it. Wokingham desires to become a tree city of the world. It does not do this by removing trees, rather re-provision this area for such an aim, rewild it. The site is next to an ancient woodland with all the associated wildlife and biodiversity. There is plenty of wildlife around. This includes deer, slowworms, as noted in the previous ecology report. Building on this site puts yet more pressure on the wildlife and will effectively reduce it. Claiming that biodiversity will increase due to small gardens in place of a larger open space is a poor calculation. The sustainable travel plan is essentially to give money to My Journey, which does not build sustainable travel infrastructure, and to build a pathway into the sang allocated to Montague Path. That is not a sustainable travel plan. This will simply introduce 100+ cars into a busy road junction. Regarding this, how will cars coming from Wokingham access this site? They will need to travel up the A329M, up to the A329M and turn back and come back. This does add to the merging of Wokingham and Bracknell, and this simply needs to be stopped. Part of the documentation mentions that the separation will effectively be formed by the railway line to the south of development. What is odd is that the previous application was rejected and the appeal against that rejection withdrawn. Due to subsequent meetings between WBC and the applicant, we are now faced with this application in a non-designated green space area. What has been going on here? I was assured by the executive member in charge of the local plan update that is in draft at the moment, when asked that the forthcoming draft local plan has absolutely no bearing on this application. This is recorded. As a technical note, there is a note about parking management. Such provisions and facilities are just useless paper items, as evidenced by the various parking issues within Montague Park. Finally, speaking to one resident, they mentioned that this is simply a stitch-up and that have lost complete faith in the development process, which I think was mentioned earlier, that we need to be seen to be open and have such issues taken aboard. My reading of the application details of this evening make me think the whole thing is an apology excuse to cover up for the previous objections, as opposed to a positive acknowledgement that development could add to the nature of Wokingham. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, members. Carl, Rebecca, Andrew.
Okay. I've got a couple of questions. It's a confusing one, this, for me, especially, and it's been mentioned a couple of times by the objectors. Is it Mr. Stark or Stack? I haven't got the Mr. Stack. Well, yeah, relating to the previous one is quite stark, I have to say. But anyway, so my first question is, could you detail the differences between the previous refused application, 182882, and this one? I know there's a reduction in houses, if you could detail that, but also what else changed? Because I noticed in the objections, Councillor Murray referred to this as a marginally revised submission. So I guess my question is, well, my first one is that correct? Joanna.
Thank you. Yeah, so the main difference is in the reduction in number of dwellings from 74, I believe, to 54, and also redesigned another section of the application site. Moreover, moreover, there is also a change in that various infrastructure contributions will now be secured for this site and for the SDL, and agreement has been reached in relation to the mitigation of the impacts on the Thames Basin Heaths protection area. The layout has also been slightly amended to improve the amenity for the residents and increase the garden spaces, ensure that the houses meet the nationally described space standards, and that the residents of the apartment blocks also have better access to amenity space. Additionally, the open space provision is now compliant with the policy requirements, and there would be also a play area introduced in the northern section of the application site. This is just a very brief summary, and more details are contained within the officer's report. I'm not sure if this answers your question, Carl, but
well, thanks. That's good. It's okay. I don't expect you to go through everything because I know that would be onerous. But that's a good list, and it's kind of what I expected.
Sorry to interrupt. I don't know if Joanna has a slight problem with her microphone. Can members all hear what Joanna's saying? Okay. Anybody got a problem? Nope. Okay, fine.
Okay. My next question is, it's mentioned in a few of the objections, complaining about lack of consultation. So if you could describe what consultation went on this application, because there's certainly a couple of people saying that it didn't happen at all.
I think the reference has possibly been made here to the community involvement exercise. This is not something that the council has control over. However, the consultation with the neighbours that was carried out by the local planning authority what has been carried out. I can check the periods when it was carried out. Is this so? I'm just not quite clear which consultation you're making reference to, Carol. Sorry about this.
I suspect that's what it is, actually.
Okay.
So
I suspect it was the community involvement exercise that was referred to in one of the comments. But again, as I said, that's not something that we can control as council.
Okay, that's fine.
The applicant would normally carry out with the residents.
Okay, that's fine. I was just making sure that it wasn't the consultation we had to carry out was involved.
No, that's not.
Okay. Okay. This site is for 54 dwellings, and the SDL it is part of was planned for approximately 2,500 dwellings. Of course, it's very early days for this SDL, but how many dwellings do we think the SDL is estimated to achieve? Is it still 2,500 or is it more as it stands?
As it stands, including the development south of the railway, the total without this site would be approximately 2,450 dwellings, so slightly below the anticipated 2,500.
Okay, thanks very much. And my final question is on page 207, paragraph 48 at the top. It's referring to the flats, I think. It says units located at ground level have a designated area of defensible space to protect the occupiers' amenities. Can you describe what that means in layman's terms, i.e. terms I might understand?
Yes, of course. If you could just bear with me, I will try to share the plan. A moment. It is essentially the area to the garden area, which would there's a space between the footpath and the elevations of the ground floor flats, which means when users of the footpath use it, they wouldn't be walking right by the residents' windows, there would be a defensible space to provide a gap and privacy to them.
Okay, so I just want to.
Sorry.
Sorry, I just want to confirm that therefore would be publicly accessible amenity space. I mean, obviously it's been put aside as amenity space for those particular dwellings, but it would be publicly accessible.
Potentially, yes. The details of the boundary treatments, if any, haven't been. That's something that the conditions would be securing in this instance. So that hasn't been worked up yet, and it would be taken into account when working on the submission for this condition.
Okay, thanks. There's one other thing I want to kind of touch on, which might be a longer question, really. Obviously, we had a previous application which was refused, and then they opted to appeal that, and then eventually, after some time, withdrew the appeal. Looking at the reasons for refusal for that application, there's 6 of them. And basically it says layout, and I think the reduction in dwelling numbers has probably dealt with that one. Landscape and visual assessment, which seem to be not up to standard, and I assume has been improved and therefore included in this and has become acceptable. The Thames Basin Special Protection Area, there was no SANG, and now there is some SANG, although there are considerations about where that SANG is, considering it's meant to dissuade people from going elsewhere. Affordable housing, which I'd say that's a really good outcome, to be honest, and now agreed, and obviously subject to the S106, and also infrastructure payments, which is also agreed to subject to section 106. So that's 5 out of those 6 are pretty much covered off of those reasons for refusal. So I can see why the appeal was withdrawn and why this application come forward. My confusion is in the 6th, or it was actually 2nd in the list, reason for refusal, settlement, separation. It says in the reason for refusal, the development fails to demonstrate how it would maintain the separation between Wokingham and Bracknell and prevent harm to the visual amenities of the local area, contrary to the core strategy policy CP21 and the South Wokingham Strategic Development Location SPD. Now, when the appeal came along, obviously that was looked at again as part of our submission to the Planning Inspectorate, and in there it pretty much was maintained straight as it's written there. That is actually written in our submission, just a repeat of that, and we maintain that. So my question is, in terms of settlement separation, what has, and I guess my question is, what can possibly change between the first application and this one?
Okay, so the previous scheme had much greater density and many more dwellings were included in it, and also the areas to the south of the site, which are now to be provided as SANG, they haven't been. There hasn't been consent for those yet. Therefore, on the balance, the scheme is considered to be acceptable because, as shown in one of my slides, it is considered that there will be sufficient buffer provided by the SANGs to the south of the site, and also the woodland to the east. And overall, when all of the benefits of the proposal are taken into account, it is not considered that this issue would warrant a refusal.
Okay, I won't press you any further on that because I don't think we'll get very far. But my kind of view is that, you know, if you're putting some houses in an area and say you're going to refuse it because that's getting into the settlement gap, it shouldn't be there. And you've got to remember this is countryside as well, although obviously part of the SDL. It seems to me that if another application comes along which does the same thing, just slightly fewer houses, doesn't make any difference to that. You're still putting houses in a settlement gap. And if you're refusing it because you're encroaching on that settlement gap 2 years ago, what's the check? Yeah, I just need somebody to explain that to me, really, if it's possible. But I'm not sure it is.
Carol, it might be useful if I jump in. So the previous scheme was a much poorer scheme. Cumulatively, there was a lot wrong with it. We were heading for an appeal. We knew we were heading for appeal. And what we wanted to do is make sure we covered all the issues off for an inspector to make sure they consider everything as part of that appeal. The St Anne's Sang, which is to the south, at that time it wasn't approved either, so there was less of a secured gap between the settlements. That's now secured as part of the South Wokingham development. So we have an extension of a green space that Joanna showed earlier on, that's retained. Cumulatively, the scheme has been massively improved. I think you probably noticed the densities are low on this scheme, and we're responding to the site constraints in terms of hedges, trees, everything, to try and make it a good scheme. The difference, one of the questions I note was asked, the difference between this scheme and the previous scheme. The key difference is this is located in a designated or allocated SDL. The principle of development in an SDL is generally considered acceptable. So the plans you saw earlier on, which showed it as a part of the green gap or a public open space, all the SDLs have changed from what the initial illustrative plan was. We've sat at appeals, we've argued over this. So the original plan is I suppose a best guess at that time of what could be achieved. When you start looking at the sites in detail, you find there are constraints in some areas, there's opportunities in other areas. So what happens is the development areas will change. I think one of the key things that Joanna also mentioned is this land is no longer required for provision of open space for the South Wokingham SDL. So it's actually a windfall site, I suppose, within the SDL itself. As planning officers, we looked at it. We considered the gap. We considered the gap as being retained. In essence, it's not much different to the development to the north and Keepatch Beach. But the key difference, I suppose, between the settlement gap and this one is the Sang is now there that wasn't there before. So hopefully that clarifies your question.
Thanks, Connor, and thanks, Joanna.
Sorry, Connor, just to clarify that the Sang is in Bracknell, isn't it? What was there?
So sorry, there's two different Sangs. So the Sang for this development is actually located partly in Bracknell, partly in Wokingham, so to the northeast of here. But as part of the South Wokingham development, to the south of the railway, there's land to the south of this that wraps around St Anne's. That wasn't there. It was just an open space piece of land before. So the Sang we're actually talking about is relevant to the South Wokingham development, not this one. And that's the difference between the previous refusal and where we are today. And we can show a slide if it helps identify it.
Yes, if you can.
Yeah, Joanna, can you pull up the slide?
Yes, of course. Just 1 second. One moment. I'll just quickly scroll through the slides, and there we go. Okay, can you let me know if you can see it now?
Yep, got that.
Okay.
So the land, or the designation of St Anne's Sang consented to the south of the application site. That's the difference now. That's the big difference between before and now. We now have a secured piece of land, which can only be open space, which will retain the green gap.
Thank you, Connor. Okay, Carl. Right, moving on to Rebecca.
I think the question's kind of been answered there, really, because I did also want to raise what Carl has said. My concerns again about, this statement right at the beginning here that it lies within the countryside and the settlement boundary. My main question is, could somebody just clarify the access for the road? Because I heard a comment that one of the speakers made about you can only access the road into the site if you're coming from Bracknell. So would you be turning right from Wokingham into it? Can somebody clarify, because I can't see it.
Hi, sorry. No, that's correct. So basically the only way to turn into the site is the same as it is now for the St Anne's Manor and the Buckhurst Lodge, is basically to come along from the Copper Beach roundabout. It's left in, left out. And obviously it's a right turn out as well, so you can turn back out towards the roundabout.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Andrew. Yes, thank you. I have 5 questions, if I may, and I'd like to ask them separately and have them each one answered separately. I'd like to pick up firstly on the matter that Rebecca's just raised about vehicle access. Now, Connor, if I've understood you correctly, sorry, Chris, if I've understood you correctly, you're saying that the access to St Anne's Drive from Wokingham Town Centre would be via the Copper Beach roundabout. There's no right turn into St Anne's Drive. But is there any possibility that vehicles might do dangerous U-turns elsewhere along the A329 in order to avoid having to go all the way up to the Copper Beach roundabout? And if so, if there is that possibility, has the safety impact of this been assessed? Bearing in mind, that we are potentially talking about fairly significant numbers, of vehicles that might do this. So that's the first question. And if it's okay, I'd like to ask them separately.
Yeah. So just to kind of confirm for you there, basically, as you turn right out of the site, or if you were coming from Wokingham and heading towards the Copper Beach roundabout, there is a full central island, a grassed verge and a curbed island, therefore preventing anybody from being able to turn into the site, or obviously turning before they get to the roundabout and obviously come round and come back. So that's already been done.
Okay, thank you for that. On a related sort of transport issue, it's parking. And I note that garages and carports are included in the calculations for parking. I notice a reference on page 216 to quote, residential parking should be on plot. Now, there seem to be 11 spaces in parking bays for visitors, with 21 allocated in total, unallocated in total for residents and visitors. Looking at the drawings, would it be correct to conclude that the design does not allow for very much additional on-road parking outside that in the 11 parking bays? It's also not clear from the drawings where parking for some of these plots is. This concerns me because it may indicate that there could be more pressure for on-road parking. This is also potentially this parking problem is also potentially exacerbated, I would imagine, by the possibility that some of the residents might decide not to use their garages or carports, for the intended purpose, and that would significantly change the calculations, as to the number of spaces actually available for on plot parking. So, can officers confirm whether there's any ability to condition that garages and carports must be retained for this use and not converted into habitable accommodation at a later date? Is that something that could be included in the exemptions from permitted development rights that are outlined on page 177? And then the final parking related question refers to the parking management strategy, which is mentioned on page 176. Who's responsible for implementing this, including if the roads are adopted? And what recourse do residents have if they are unhappy with its operation?
So just come back to you on the parking. So in terms of all the houses have been provided with 2 parking spaces, and that's 2 parking spaces. Some have garages on top of the 2 parking spaces, and if a carport has been provided, it's basically because there has been either 1 or there is 2 parking spaces, but the second parking space could be in the carport. The carports are open-sided, and therefore that is not something that's quite easily to be converted. And I'd obviously have to defer to my planning colleagues as whether or not it's for that to go on, but I believe condition 38 secures the PD rights to remove the garage element. And I say the carports are something completely different. They're not enclosed anyway, so therefore that would be a completely separate matter. And in terms of the parking management strategy, that is there purely just to kind of to manage and monitor what is happening. At this moment in time, we're not certain whether the site will be adopted. There's some elements of it that that don't fully comply with adoptable standards, and as such, it's something that we probably wouldn't adopt some of those roads, so it would fall to a management company or for the residents to manage themselves. But the benefit to the council is that it complies with the council's parking standards. For every one of the houses has 2 parking spaces. The flats have 1 allocated each, plus obviously the range of unallocated, and there are visitors across the site which obviously comply to the council standards. I guess an added benefit is the site is located away from the main part of the public highway, which is obviously our main concern is London Road. That is WL aligned, and there is no reason for vehicles to be parking that far out or to try and park that far out, which would affect the public highway at that point.
Okay, thank you for that answer. I am still concerned, though, with the design of the roads, which don't lend themselves easily, I would think, as a layperson, to accommodate any significant amount of on-road parking, apart from that is in the 11 designated parking bays. So that is a concern. Sticking again with sort of transport-related matters, air quality. Given the number of new factors in that area, such as the opening of the distributor road, the nearby park and ride, the location close to the A329M and M4, which have air quality issues, is a situation which is in a situation where, such as this, what's the rationale for not attempting some air quality impact modelling before a major development is submitted? My understanding from reading the documents is that if the application is approved, then the air quality assessments and so forth would be undertaken. My concern is, as I say, given the number of factors that might raise concerns about air quality, that there would seem to be a fairly strong case in this instance for actually having some sort of modelling before an application like this is submitted. And then if this application is approved and air quality issues do become apparent, what actually realistically can be done to address these, particularly for the health of the residents who might be living on this development?
So environmental health team, they have been consulted on the proposal and considered it would be acceptable to secure submission of the assessment as a condition. They raised no objection on this ground. Moreover, this proposal lies similar. It is in similar location to Keep Hatch development, and is fairly. It's minor in quantum in comparison to the other developments, and I suggest that possibly that's why it would be acceptable for the environmental health officers to request those details to be submitted at the later stage.
Thank you for that answer, Joanna. I'd like to, the issue of the SANGs has been raised a number of times this evening. And in fact, one of the reasons for the refusal of the previous application, 1H2882, was, quote, the development provides insufficient SANG and therefore fails to secure adequate mitigation and would adversely affect on the integrity of the Thames Basin Heath Special Protection Area. Now, I'm puzzled. I understand, and we've seen pictures tonight, showing that there are new SANGs sort of being planned nearby. But I note in this application that some of the SANG provision will be Bracknell Forest SANG and also in Keep Hatch. And I think one of the speakers tonight mentioned that to access either one or both of those, you'd actually have to cross a 6-lane highway. but going back to the fact that it's Bracknell Forest sang is mentioned here, were there any specific reasons why that sang was not considered in the previous application? Because one of the reasons for refusal was the insufficient sang provision. Yeah, I'll leave that question there.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Yes, there is no requirement for sang to be adjacent or in a very near proximity to the site. And Natural England have been consulted on this solution, and they have raised no objection to the proposal, subject to the agreement from Wokingham Borough Council, who own the Keep Hatch Sang, and as well as the Bracknell Forest Council. This agreement has now been secured following negotiations with Bracknell Council. Therefore, this is why we are at the stage now where this reason for refusal no longer applies. I'm not sure if I've missed anything from your question, Andrew.
No, I've understood. Thank you very much, Joanna. And one final question, if I may. And this is going back to the issue of countryside designation. It's agreed that the site lies within designated countryside and does not meet any of the requirements for exceptions allowing development to apply. Now, I'm struggling to understand why it's stated on page 197 that it is, quote, it is relevant to consider the underlying policy objectives, end of quote, and how these might support a recommendation for approval in such a situation. Now, apart from the sustainability of this site, which has been mentioned, are there other ways that could not be found in other alternative sites in which it supports the underlying policy objectives? In other words, I'm struggling to see why we're being asked to consider the underlying policy objectives in this instance.
Yeah. Okay. So if you look at the SDLs, if you look at the local plan and the boundary of Wokingham town, it's obviously got a set out boundary. What the SDLs came along and did is they allocated land outside of that, which was in the countryside. So what you have is a situation, you have the Keep Hatch, the Bell Farm, and the Ashridge sites, they're all in the countryside, but they're in the SDL, and that is the key distinction between SDL sites and other sites. The reason they're considered to be sustainable is because the infrastructure comes with them generally. So you have Wokingham town, which has obviously got a lot of facilities, shops and infrastructure with it. In South Wokingham, you have the new district centre, you have new schools, the roads that go with it. So that is the huge difference between SDL sites and a site that's an ad hoc site that's coming forward, a windfall site in the countryside. SDLs, the principle is generally considered acceptable within the SDL, subject to the constraints and other issues that we have to look at. So that's actually been tested at appeal as well. So the inspector and the barristers basically found that argument to be sound because it was tested some years ago at an appeal. But that is the key difference. So yes, it's located in the countryside. The key distinction, it's still located within the SDL. And if the SDL, if it can be shown that a site is sustainable in the SDL, we have to look at the balance of all the issues, and we have to consider it against our housing land supply, which although it's there, it's still within the SDL. That's I think I can't point that out to you enough. So it's obviously been put forward as part of the local plan allocation in the next round of sites. Now, it carries little weight because we haven't got that far, but one of the key bits of the NPPF, which we have to all work towards in our local plans and our core strategies, is that we can't refuse things on prematurity. If a site is sustainable, it's considered to be sustainable, we can't refuse it on the fact it's not allocated, unless it has a substantial impact on the plan making process. So if it's going to really impact upon our plan making process for the next local plan, then we can look at it. As officers, we looked at this, we considered all the issues, we considered that it passed the test that we set for it, and that's why, despite it being in as it is the countryside under our policy, it's found to be acceptable. So I hope that clarifies it a little bit better. If not, I can come back.
Yeah, no, it does, Connor. Thank you very much. Okay, Gary, welcome back, Gary. Nice to see you in the flesh.
Connor made some points there which were interesting, but the bit I find interesting is that we looked at the Lidl planning application and we look at this planning application. They both use pretty much the same policies, and one is used to be able to turn something down, where the other one is being used to get around it and approve it. And that creates a slight difficulty for me. Again, in this, there are similarities to this and the Reading training ground at Hogwood, where the same thing applies. The STLs, which is the council's principle of STLs, is red line areas by which we would contain all of the development within that red line to prevent STL creep. And then what actually happens is, in this particular case, and in Reading training ground at Hogwood, the complete opposite happened. What we actually did was we used the fact that there was an STL there with facilities as the reason to allow creep. And so in a way, if the council is going to go forward with its future local plan thinking, and it's going along the STL principle, which I believe it is, then people will be let down by the fact that the promises that are made in how the concept of an SCL is to work won't happen. I mean, interestingly, this one was turned down and the appeal withdrawn, and it's then been resubmitted. Several of the members who made comments in the report, the residents of parish town councils and borough councillors, have all picked on key points which don't seem to be answered. One point I would like an answer on, and that is the number of mature and TPO trees that are going to be cut down to allow development to take place. And there's a very vague word in there, or whatever we cut down, we'll plant one or two more. It's very, very vague. So they could be cutting down very mature trees, and it would take 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years for these trees to get replaced. There was a question asked that executive recently about, I think it was by Councillor Fruin, on exactly that point. And it said that the council does not monitor these conditions, where arboreal experts say 25% of new trees die. And then without any monitoring, this condition has no use whatsoever. So should we approve this, I think the condition must state the officers will review the tree planting within the time frame before signing off the condition. I would also like to know exactly how many trees are coming out, how big they are, and what they're going to be replaced with. The tree biodiversity and tree protection task force group, which I believe you chaired, Chris. They had Wokingham Veteran Tree Association attending, and they made a point that they said that no sensible design should be around the retention of existing mature trees. And so really any form of development that chops them all down, I don't think is appropriate. My personal view is this should be refused for the same reason, is that the site is in designated countryside and does not satisfy any of the condition exceptions in CP11. There are obviously other reasons, but that's my personal view, and thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Rochelle.
A lot of my questions have been asked already, but I do have a problem with a couple of things. The officer said you can have a designated sang anywhere in the area. So if they wanted a sang, they could put the sang in Southampton, possibly. It would be accessible by train. And there seemed to be the idea that you're building on green land that was actually the same kind of green land that we just talked about for Swallows Meadows. So why are some green lands more important than other green lands? And what are we actually doing? Are we also informing the residents that since not all the roads will be actually adopted by the borough, that they'll be paying very high management fees to maintain these roads while paying full council tax as well? Because in one of the local estates, they only adopted 2 roads, and the residents are going to be paying several £1,000s a year in management fees. I just wonder if we're telling them these kind of interesting stories or not. And could somebody please explain to me how you would actually evaluate whether green areas are good or bad, so you can build on them? And lastly, when you're talking about having 25% of the trees die, I'll give you a good picture of the Winnish Sang, where 85% of the trees died because they don't ever water them. And also in a few of the new developments, a lot of the trees that were planted in them are dead as a doornail and now under somebody's driveway. So can we have some evaluate how they decide where Sang can be? How far can it be from the residence? A number of questions there.
Thank you. I apologise to Gary because I think he was asking a question about how we do deal with the trees when they have to be removed. Perhaps to get nods to that.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Cara. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Chris. Yes, the proposal regrettably will lead to removal of a number of trees. I've counted that there would be 35 trees proposed to be removed. In the arboricultural impact assessment, it is stated that alternative access solutions were being considered. However, they would not be, which would possibly result in fewer trees being removed. However, the other solutions were not possible due to the highway safety reasons, which is why this current solution is proposed. The majority of trees which are proposed would be the 19 trees in this northeast corner of the site where the junction is proposed. However, those trees have relatively low value. Specifically, 9 of that would be 10 of those trees are valued as category U or C of trees, and that is that they either should be removed for reasons of sound arboricultural management, or that they have low quality and value, and usually are trees with a stem below 15 centimeters. 9 of the proposed trees to be removed in this location would be category B trees, which have moderate quality and value, and none of the trees, whether in this access location or anywhere on the site that are proposed to be removed, have the highest quality, high quality or value. So only the low or moderate quality and value trees would be removed.
Did you want to come back, Gary?
How many are actual TPO trees?
Okay, just wait a second. There would be 3 TPO trees removed at the access, and hold me a second. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That would be 7 trees, 7 TPO trees removed throughout the site.
Did I get 12? Was that 12 in total?
7 was it?
7, sorry. 7 trees, yes. So they're listed in the arboricultural impact assessment document, and looking at them, these are trees number 5, 6, 7, 8, 69, G11, and G16. That's how they are annotated on the plans.
Did you want to know how the new trees were looked after to maximise that they survived, just surviving?
Thank you. I would really like to finally say then, personally speaking, I think the planning application could be refused. And my reason is it's designated countryside and does not satisfy any of the exceptions of CP11. So I would make that as a proposal.
Okay. Let me just hear the other speakers and I'll.
I wasn't quite finished yet, but okay, Chris.
Yeah, I know you had a question on Sang. If you're,
Yes, where the sang can be, but also the fact is that the trees in a lot of places are not maintained properly. The planning committee went out to Cambridge several years ago to look at some estates that they built there, where they built the houses around the trees rather than taking the trees down to build houses, which was a much better idea. But apparently we don't do that here. I'm not quite sure why. If somebody could possibly give me an answer for that also, it would be interesting.
I think,
Mr. Stack, I believe you have your hand up. I can't see it, but I'm told you have your hand up.
Yes,
Did you want to say something?
Yes, I wasn't sure if I was allowed to raise another point, but just on the subject of
technically not, but if it's brief, please.
Okay, just on the subject of trees, I'd just like it noted that 2 years ago, a whole row of TPO oak trees were illegally cut down on the site. This was forwarded on to the local council for their investigation.
Okay, thank you.
I also believe there are more than 7 TPO trees that will come down from the site as per the tree survey.
Okay, Bill?
Yeah, thank you. Oh, let me take this off.
Just a second, Bill. I'm so sorry. Connor, did you want to come?
Did I get my answer about the sang?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I beg your pardon, Rochelle. Connor, were you coming in here?
I was going to come in and answer the sang and another question, but I can just answer the sang now. So yeah, the Natural England allow sangs not to be located next to a development, not in Southampton, as Rochelle pointed out. But
how far? How far from the development?
It depends on the size of the sang, but it's between 4 and 5 kilometres away, subject to them having car parking. But if you look at North Wokingham, the Matthews Green development up there, which is 760 houses, the sang is not located next to it. You can walk to the sang. So as long as it's within a reasonable walking distance, irrespective of the fact you have to cross a road or a busy road, it is acceptable. And as I say, if it's got a car park, if the sang is big enough, it could be 4 or 5 kilometres away.
Isn't that kind of defeating some of the things for climate change to drive to a sang?
That's not who makes that call. That's Natural England.
Okay, I thought that was Gregor saying things like that.
We rely on Natural England. Right, Bill, sorry.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to highways, and it might be I just need some clarification on this. I think Rebecca said that vehicles leaving Wokingham and heading towards the Copped Beach roundabout cannot turn right, therefore would have to go up to the roundabout and come back. What I'm looking at on the drawing is, and this is what I want clarification, vehicles exiting that site and wanting to head towards the Copped Beach roundabout will have to cross 6 lanes of traffic. Am I right in that? Chris?
Yes, yeah, you are right. But the bit you are missing there is it is a signalised junction. So that arm of St Anne's Manor will only be able to operate when all other movements have stopped. So it was a junction that was upgraded as part of the North Wokingham Distributor Road. So all the upgrades have already been done to that location, which signalised that arm.
Would that not then be possible to signalise it to allow those vehicles to turn right into the development?
No, it was due to the location of the North Wokingham Distributor Road. That was one of the reasons that right turn lane was not incorporated in. It was not possible to do so. Hence why it's been delivered as it is now. And as I say, the current access is for a left in, left out, or right out with the signals.
Okay, thank you.
Paul.
Thank you. 2 questions. One was about highways again for Chris. Looking at that road, I was thinking exactly the same thing as Bill, but I was thinking you've said it's impossible to turn the wrong way, but actually if you went in that out, you could do exactly that. And we've got examples further down Wokingham Road where people turn right in turns that they shouldn't turn right in, and generally cause quite a few accidents and prangs of various sorts. So I'm a bit uncomfortable with the layout of the road, and I'm not convinced you're going to actually be able to stop people going in there and force them to go around the roundabout.
Yeah, I think you can, Pauline. I mean, Joanna, are you able to pull up the site layout for us, the one that's shown in the committee report?
Yes, of course. Just 1 second.
Thank you.
Sorry, Chris, did you mean the one that is just a general site layout or the one including the junction?
Yeah, the one on page 225. It may just be easier to see it on the screen rather than, or if the members can look at page 225.
That's what I'm looking at.
Yeah, so Pauline, you've mentioned that somebody could turn in the out. So if they're coming from Wokingham, and then obviously you've got that right turn out of the site. If someone was to turn right in at that point, they would be head on towards traffic. They would have to turn right, then turn left through the junction, and then the slip road in is actually quite far to the east of where you were saying they could potentially turn right. So they wouldn't be able to do that because there is the signalised junction there. So the slip road is actually, you can't really see it very clearly, but it's under the trees. It's more to the east. It's close. It's quite far away. It's a good probably 15, 20 metres plus away from that point, at a point where it just isn't possible for someone to turn in to make that move.
So is there a physical divider in between the in and the out that stops them doing that?
There is the only gap there is it's quite a narrow gap. It's probably, well, whatever it is, 4 metres or whatever, as you are turning out right. Then you have the islands for the signalised junction. I think, let me just see if I'm able to.
Page 223 is actually clearer.
Oh, is it? Okay. Let me.
So I think my question then, Chris, thank
So
you.
here,
That
Pauline,
is
I don't know if you can see that there.
Yeah.
This is the out. So it's quite narrow. As you're coming along, obviously you've got 3 lanes of relatively free-flowing traffic. For someone to slow down to properly turn in there, they have to then turn towards oncoming traffic to then make this very tight turn back around this build out of the island. So it's really deterred from happening, and obviously with the island all the way through the Central Reserve, right the way through here as well, it's not something that is going to be easily possible for somebody to make that manoeuvre.
Thank you, Chris. That helps a lot, actually.
Okay.
The second question I had was about Gary's proposal. I found it quite tempting, so I'd like some view on the conditions on that proposal.
You mean reviews, the reasons for reviews?
Yeah.
What are you actually asking for?
Whether they're valid.
Well, we need to go back to Gary. Should we go back to Gary and ask him? What? Not quite sure. What was your reason for refusal, Gary? Can you spell it out?
Hang on, I'm in a bit of a mess here.
Oh.
Yeah, it's my own views. It should be refused. And my reason is the site is in designated countryside and does not satisfy any of the exceptions in CP11.
Okay. Do you want to comment on that, Pauline? Otherwise, I will ask for a seconder for that proposal to refuse this application. Carl?
Yeah, I just wanted to perhaps add the fact that, what I was talking about and Connor was trying to explain to me about the SDL and stuff, and I wasn't quite convinced, to be fair. So I think I would like to add to that the fact that the settlement separation, which was a reason for refusal of the first application, I don't think has been dealt with. And the effective of this would be, well, a refusal is already written down here, which is contrary to core strategy policy CP21 of the SDL, effectively. I don't know whether people think that, or whether it's feasible to add that to it if we do have a proposal for refusal. But I'd be happy to second it if needed.
Can I check with our officers if those reasons for refusal are make sense at least?
Yeah. So what I would say is the intrusion into the countryside, CP12. I think I don't think that's a good reason for refusal. I have to say, because as I said to you, the STLs have this we've done it before, where the sites in the well, the SDLs are actually in the countryside, and the sites are allocated through the SDL process. The settlement separation and the loss of trees, I think, are probably more appropriate of the two.
You're putting the trees in, Gary?
If Carl is proposing 21, I'd go along with that. Yes.
Okay, you both happy with that? So we've got three things then. It's in the countryside, and no exceptional circumstances according to CP11. Don't believe the SANG acts as a separation, and you do not like the loss of trees. Rephrase that in a better way.
TPO trees, I think. There is a TPO on those trees, I believe, if that's the case.
Okay. Angus?
Thank you, Chairman. What I'm hearing from Connor is that, in effect, in planning terms, the SDL trumps CP11. How clearly and how well can we substantiate that claim?
Yeah, I think that's correct. I think the countryside, so development in the countryside, I don't think that's a reason for refusal. I think the settlement, separation of settlements is a more logical one to take. And as Gary said originally, the tree issue, loss of TPOs, he mentioned previously. So, but I think, yeah, the CP11 countryside, I would, as an advice, wouldn't go that way with it, because I think that's not defendable.
So the advice is that we'd have trouble with appeal on the CP11. Would you be happy to?
Yeah, I'll withdraw. I'll be guided by Connor on that.
Okay, so we stick with the SANG and the loss of TPO trees. Those are your two reasons for refusal. Angus?
Chairman, I understand the point. I'm not quite sure at the moment whether I agree with it, but I understand the point about trees. I don't understand the point about the SANG. Is that what we're also the second thing we're putting forward?
The point about the SANG, does the SANG act as a separation between Wokingham and Bracknell? That's just the proposition.
I'm afraid I really don't understand what we're saying.
Yeah, just made the point. I think what Connor was saying about that was that when this original, I don't want to fight against my own position, but I will, devil's advocate. When the original application came in, that SANG at the south didn't exist. So therefore, the refusal originally was that there is no separation, or I suspect this is part of the same area, and therefore they didn't want to build on it because it would fill in the gap. But now he's saying because the SANG is there now, and it obviously is in perpetuity, therefore the gap is kind of confirmed, and therefore this won't be filling the gap. I don't agree with that, but that's, I think, a fair explanation of what Connor was meaning to say.
Yeah, the area is protected and will remain the same, as you say, in perpetuity. And therefore the gap is there because the SANG acts as a gap.
Yeah, but I think the point is that that gap was already there, although it wasn't protected. I mean, the gap is still there as a settlement gap, even though it's not protected. We don't say that there's no settlement gap because there's no SANG there or other form of protection.
Well, let's go back to the office and ask why previously that area was not considered to be a permanent area which could be regarded as a separation area.
So previously the land that's now got permission was just the field. It didn't have any permission. It was a site within South Wokingham, well, adjacent to South Wokingham, shall I say. The difference between now and then is that now has consent for open space, and actually the South Wokingham development is so South Wokingham south of the railway is reliant on that for SANG. That's the key difference. The judgment you need to make tonight is whether the settlement gap that we're saying is okay, is wide enough. I think that's the difference between our arguments. We're saying it is wide enough. I think some of the members are saying it's not wide enough.
Okay, anybody else? Pauline?
Thank you. Just to go back to Connor, that doesn't entirely make sense to me, because that would mean that any settlement gap that didn't have protection through a SANG wouldn't count as a settlement gap, which doesn't make any logical sense at all. There's loads of settlement gaps that don't have protection of SANGs, and we count them as settlement gaps.
Sorry, Pauline, I didn't understand what you said there. In essence, so the difference here is that this is within the STL. So lots of settlements have land around them, but they're not located within an STL. This is located in the STL, where, as I said, the principle of development is generally considered acceptable. The issue previously was there was no retention, so that the land around it potentially could come forward for development. In this case, it's now secured as part of the South Wokingham development, so it is secured as open space.
Okay, it's not vulnerable. Angus?
Chairman, surely we don't have, as it were, a gap policy that in terms of interpreting, filling up the space, to use a different word, between Wokingham and Bracknell, surely Keep Hatch Beach has come, and that, in fact, is much closer to Bracknell than the area we're talking about. I mean, I'm not sure which way I'm going on this, but I'm trying to get a clarity of facts of what we're arguing.
Well, we don't have to decide why it was not regarded as a separation gap before. We're here to discuss this application. So I'm having trouble understanding why an area which is SANG and is protected, how it cannot be regarded as a gap between the two settlements, which is guaranteed as well, even if that's not necessary. Where is the problem with it? I don't see it. If nobody else has any comments, I'll go to the vote on that. Are we happy what this is about? So it's just about the SANG and the loss of the TPO trees. It's proposed by Gary and seconded by Carl. Okay, can I see those in favour of?
Sorry, Chairman.
Yep, go on.
Are we arguing solely now about the trees? That's what I thought you said then.
If I did, I didn't mean that. This is SANG. Well, sorry, not SANG. It's a separate. Is there a separation now? And the proposers here are saying it's not a separation, that it doesn't form a separation between Bracknell and Wokingham, and they're also saying that a reason for refusal is that TPO trees are going to be removed. Is that clear?
That's clear, but I think many people, definitely myself, would have different views on those two different items.
Yes, of course. That's why we're debating it.
Just to clarify this, I obviously got written down here from the reason for refusal on the previous application. It's not in here, but it basically says settlement separation. The development fails to demonstrate how it would maintain the separation between Wokingham and Bracknell, prevent harm to the visual amenities of the local area, which is contrary to core strategy policy CP21 and the South Wokingham Strategic Development Location SPD. So that's the original one we relied on, one of the ones we relied on to refuse the last one. So I'm suggesting to use that verbatim as it is there, plus the loss of TPO trees. I would suggest that's what we're voting on now. I'd agree that they're different things, but.
If I may just add, Carl, so that's the way that it is demonstrated now that this separation gap can be maintained is through the provision of that SANG south and east to the application site. Moreover, not something I have mentioned during my presentation, but it is listed in the officer's report. The distances between the existing dwellings in Keep Hatch Gardens and the first dwellings going east in the Bracknell area beyond the A329 would be the same distance as the dwellings in the proposed application site. So effectively, we wouldn't be bringing, the application wouldn't be bringing any more dwellings any closer to the dwellings on the other side of A329 than currently is the case with the Keep Hatch Gardens. Thank you.
I accept that. Can I just say the point that was the case previously when we refused it? And then we went to appeal with a submission, or didn't go to appeal, didn't get there. The submission was repeated in the appeal submission. So that was the case then. That's been my question all the way through that I'm confused about. If it was okay then, so if it was a problem then, why is it okay now? And I can see there's an argument for why, but I don't agree with it. That's the thing. I accept the argument, but I don't agree with it.
I'd just like to come to Kate Collins, who's the agent who has her hand up. I came to Mr. Stack. I'll come to you as well for a brief comment, if you like. I think you're muted.
Apologies about that. It's just some clarification on the TPA trees, because Mr. Stack mentioned the ones down the middle of the site. I mean, they're obviously, that's a very historic thing now. They're not there anymore. Are we just talking about the 3 on the site frontage as part of this reason for refusal that you're referring to? Just some clarification on that would be helpful from my point of view. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Appreciate that.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, right. Andrew. Yeah, one of the reasons that's being suggested for recommending refusal has to do with the separation, which was one of the reasons that was given. It was the second reason, in fact, that was given for refusal of the previous application. And I agree with Carl, it would be good actually to quote verbatim, the wording that was used there. Now, the problem that I've got with this is that I think that some of the discussion has given too much emphasis to the new provision, of a sang nearby, a sang to the south. And I can understand there is a line of argument there that this does help to maintain a degree of separation. But as a layperson, it would seem to me that the fact that we would be building on the remainder of that land, 54 homes, is reducing significantly the existing separation between Wokingham and Bracknell. And to me, that's the issue, the key issue, not whether the provision of this new sang on its own would be sufficient. So I would like the wording, to focus to be written in such a way that it would focus on the separation issue in particular, rather than feeling that the sang may or may not deal adequately with that issue. Thank you. I think no one's. Did you want an answer to any of that? Okay, I think we will go.
Sorry, Chair. I was just going to ask the question. I'm not sure if members want to do this, but do you want to see the plan again to show the area and Bracknell, just to help you make up your minds?
No harm in that, Connor.
Joanna, sorry, could you bring up the plan that shows the area?
Sorry, I was on mute. Just one moment. I'm clicking through the slides again. And here you go. Can you see the slide now showing the application site and the A329?
Yeah.
Okay.
So so just as I think Carol has pointed out, that the reason we see it differently is St Anne's sang didn't exist in the previous application. It does now. So that's the difference between the two. But it is a judgment call whether members think that the settlement gap is large enough at this point or not. Obviously, we consider it is. If you look at key patches, we said before, to the north, the distances are quite similar. There is a development in Amy Corner, which is proposing open space on that boundary as well. So it's really a judgment call between the members.
Would you be able to help here, Connor, with the wording, maybe along the lines that Andrew has suggested?
I'd have to take a look. Sorry, I don't have the wording in front of me. I'd have to take a look at the original wording and see. I think the original wording probably is quite generic anyway. It's probably it covers the point of settlement separation. Just bear with me a second. Yeah, I mean the original wording of reason two, the reason for refusal 2 was settlement separation. It's as I say, it's not massively specific. So if that's what members are minded to go with, I think it would also cover this scheme if that's your consideration.
Could you read that out?
Bear with me a second. So I've just closed it down. The development fails to demonstrate how it would maintain the separation between Wokingham and Bracknell and prevent harm to the visual amenities of the local area, which is contrary to core strategy policy CP21 and the South Wokingham SPD.
Is that acceptable to the proposal and second? The tree, yeah. Okay.
That's on the trees.
Plus the trees.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I think we're going to vote on that then. Can I see those in favour of approving this refusal, please? That's 6. Those against. So that is carried and the application is refused.
Chair, can I be clear? It's only one. Are you just adding one reason for refusal, or are you adding a second?
We're voting on the trees and the separation, TPO trees, yeah. Yep, that was 6 in. Yeah, that was 6 in favour of the refusal and 3 against. Move on to page 243, which is Not Bean Farm. And Natalie John, good evening. Over to you.
Good evening, Chair. Hopefully you can see my screen.
Yes.
Oops. So this is application 211975. It's an application at Not Bean Farm and Not Bean Lane in Swallowfield. It's a full application consisting of a number of different elements. It's the proposed change of use of land from agricultural to equestrian. It's erection of 2 stable buildings with associated hard standing, creation of a menage and an extended vehicular access, which is the retrospective element. The application is before planning committee because the site area is over 1 hectare and is therefore defined as a major application. The application site is 2.37 hectares and is located on the northern side of Not Bean Lane. Not Bean Farmhouse, as you can see in the centre of the slide, is outside the application site, but is a Grade 2 listed building, and the property has an existing stable and paddock, which can be seen in this area here. That's the stable and the paddock area there. In the surrounding area is Farley Hall Equestrian Centre, the paddocks for which can be seen on the surrounding land. As I said, there's a number of different elements to the proposal, and I'll just run through each of those. Planning permission is sought for an extended vehicular access, providing access to the proposed stables and menage. This is the retrospective element of the proposal. The driveway links the driveway adjacent to the existing outbuilding to an existing field gate. The gravel surface that's already in place can be seen in the image on screen, and details of the surface have been provided. An updated tree protection details condition is recommended to show all of the elements of the proposed development. The proposed driveway is an extension of an existing driveway and will provide access to the proposed equestrian development. Permission is also sought for the erection of 2 stables buildings located to the west of the field, as shown on this plan here. And we've also got the floor plans, which shows there'll be 4 stables, a tack and feed room, a hay and straw store. The stable will be used by the applicant and his family, and a use condition is recommended. The elevations for the proposed stables are shown here. The proposed scale of the stables is considered to be commensurate with the size of the associated paddocks and the number of horses to be kept on the land. The application proposes a 20 by 60 metre all-weather surface menage adjacent to Nutbean Lane with an access track around one side, details of which have been provided. The application site is in the countryside and the principle of stables, menage and equestrian use is considered to be appropriate development in accordance with CP11 of the core strategy. The site is also located in a valued landscape and forms part of the Farley Hill Wooded Sand and Gravel Hills landscape. There are other equestrian uses nearby. The application also relates to change of use of the land within the red line for equestrian use. There's an update report which has been provided to member, which also seeks a landscaping condition and has been updated to include the ecologist's comments on the application. The application is recommended for approval as set out in the report and in the update. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. No speakers, so over to you, members. Carl.
I just want to make a quick comment about and say thanks to Natalie and also Joanna for the last one, because that's the second manège of the evening, and I had no idea what that word meant or never heard of it until I got this pack last week. Didn't have many of them in Salford, I have to say. And just to add that, you know, I've got no objections or comments other than that. Swallowfield Parish saying they're happy as long as it's not a non-commercial use condition applied, which it is. So yeah, I'm pretty happy.
Manège is your actual French. Andrew.
Yes, thanks. I note that the officer's report says that the application involves no commercial aspect. They did say, though, that the application does involve a change in land use for equestrian use, and I understand that. Picking up on Carl's comment about Swallowfield Parish Council, and that they don't object to the application, but they did ask that the use be conditioned as non-commercial. So my question is, if the intention of the current owners or indeed future owners was to change to seek commercial use, would that involve a different category of land use? We've already been told that this application is seeking a change of land use for equestrian. Would it involve a further, change in land use? And would it require a new planning application in order to change it from non-commercial to commercial use? And if it did, if that was required, I know that sometimes in the past, I don't know what the correct term for this is, but we have been able to grant approval specific to a particular applicant. So if this family say that that there is to be no commercial aspect to this land, could that be conditioned in such a way or agreed in such a way that it would only apply to this particular family and applicant?
Natalie.
Hi there. Yep, just looking at condition 4, which is where the condition on commercial purposes is restricted. So if the applicant wanted to use the facility for commercial purposes, an application to remove that condition would need to be made, and there would need to be consideration of that application at that time. That's not for consideration at this current time. So an assessment would be made at that point in terms of whether it was acceptable in terms of, say, for example, highway safety and things like that.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Let's go to the recommendation on page 244 with an extra condition in the supplementary planning agenda regarding landscaping. So see those in favour of approving this application, please. Thank you. I think that's unanimous, and except that Gary is not here, so it's still unanimous. Everybody vote? Yeah, thank you. Right, okay. Thank you very much. And that brings the meeting to an end. Thank you very much. Members.